Hello friends! How do you all do today? I hope you're having a wonderful day. Today we're going to be talking about character design and creating characters. Not only for game dev, though that is usually where a lot of my ideas spark from, but also for D&D, for creative writing, and for anything of that nature. And, well, what is a character? Merriam-Webster defines a character as reading from a dictionary is the fastest way to get half your audience to leave your stream. Anyways, what is a character? I mean, that explains why I dropped from 8 viewers to 3 viewers as soon as the stream started. Yeah. So, the way I see a character, it really comes down to 3 parts of building it, and that's past, present, and future. The past being the backstory or the world building that has developed them into where they are now. The present being their wants and needs, which we'll get into that in a little while. And the future meaning development. Where is their character going to go? What is the character going to accomplish? And how are you going to play that out? Now, like I said, most of this is going to apply to any sort of character. This is going to apply to many different parts in the creative process. But I wanted to focus mostly on wants and needs, because I feel like that's where a lot of people neglect their characters, both in game design and for tabletop games. And it was also part of what sparked the idea of having the stream in my brain mind. See, one of my friends approached me and actually, let me pull up the exact message, which said, hey, where is it here? I need to make a character for a low fantasy setting. How do I play a King's Ranger and not make him super generic? And like that feels like you're already working from the wrong start, because you've already decided what, the character's going to be, which is a King's Ranger. And I would encourage you to think about it from a different direction. But we'll get into sparking that question in yourself later. But let's get into some definitions first. We will get into this more example. I'll explain in detail on that. Also, this is a discussion. If you have any questions, feel free to toss them in chat. I will be reading chat. I sometimes do that thing. But for needs and wants, like, there are external wants and internal needs for just about any character in just about any media that's recognizable and effective. If you're writing a character, they need to have a reason to exist. And think about any Disney character. What does a character want? Well, Elsa wants to run away. Simba wants to live the carefree Hakuna Matata lifestyle. Ariel wants more. Rocky wants to win the fight. Every character has a want, but what they need is different. What they need is something internal. Elsa needs to learn to embrace her power and the people who care about her. Simba needs to learn that people respect him and he needs to lead. They have thoughts about that on separately, but Ariel needs to be loved for who she is, not just for her voice or for her father's crown. Kuzco wants to build a fancy mansion. Kuzco needs to see what the people of his realm do and how they live. And Rocky, at the end of the day, needs to lose. He needs to lose for it to become an interesting story, because that completes his character arc of showing him that there's more important things than just winning a fight. And the wants should lead into the needs. One build should build into the next. So, how does this work for tabletop gaming? Well, when you make a character, you should already have an idea of what they want and what they need. And how you get there can be whatever process. We will cover ways of starting that out in the future, later on in the stream. But that's going to be the core of your character. That's going to be the core motivation that drives everything your character does, and drives the way that they act, and drives the way that you roleplay them. is what gives them a personality. It gives them something to do. It lets you know, you the player, you the actor, you the writer, know what a character will do in any given situation. Also, hello to Test Name, hello to Kashak, hello to Tuzzy, hello to Hensha, hello to Artemis, hello to Brekik, hello to Vori, hello to Logan, and hello to Skylers, and hello to the 4 concurrent viewers of all the people who I just named. Look. Ah, I love YouTube. Now, I should mention, you don't need to have a personality for every single character. But it'd be a lot cooler if you did. You know what I mean? Like, if you want to make a world feel lived in, everybody has their own motivations, everybody has their own thoughts, everybody has their own goals, hopes, and dreams. Right? Hello, Atoro. Everybody has their own ideas of what's important in life, and when you make a character that is which is a generic barbarian, which is just a generic character, then you are robbing yourself of the opportunity to create something more interesting. There certainly is a place for tropes, and playing a character based on tropes can be valid, but giving them a need can help pull them above just being a trope. Does that make sense? Hello, Vaporeon. So you need to find your character's heart. And I will point out right here that if you're doing this for game dev, it's very important because this is why people will care about your character. This is why your villain's motivation will make sense to the player. You know? Because nobody thinks of themselves as the villain. And this is also true if you're playing yourself an evil character. Nobody in this world thinks that they are the villain. Everybody has a reason for what they're doing. The conquistadors conquer because they genuinely, heartfelt believe that what they're doing will make all the people they're conquering live a better life. The people who are standing up to you, well, they're holding back their society by not embracing your way. The missions are people who genuinely believe that if you adopt their faith, then you will be a better person and be saved. The evil Dark Lord believes that if everybody just submitted to him, he could rule the world and stop anybody else from starting a war. These characters become more interesting when they have a motivation. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I'm evil. Nobody. And if you're playing an evil character in a tabletop RPG, the same thing applies. You should not see yourself as evil. You should see yourself as a good guy who's being misunderstood or held back by XYZ. One of the biggest problems ever to exist in D&D is the alignment chart. It's an absolute plague. It's been a plague since the beginning. It's been nothing of value has truly come from the alignment chart. That's what I say. Hello, Chelsea, and welcome. Gosh, we have about 20 people in chat right now, and YouTube's reporting 6. You wake up in the morning and say, am I evil every day? I mean, honestly, that's fair. And that's actually, I'm going to take that at face value. I know you're probably memeing, but I'm going to take that at pure face value and say, that's a really interesting character dynamic. If you're writing a character that wakes up and is afraid that their act is petrified by their own actions and their own history, that could be a really interesting character. What is their want? They want to be a good person. What is their need? They need to understand and come to terms and accept themselves and what they've done and believe in themselves and believe that they are good. Like, that right there can be a very good character starting point, or if not starting point, a way of fleshing out a character. And yeah, if you're a player character, evil does not mean party destruction. Nobody burns down an orphanage. Nobody will burn down an orphanage. Ever. Right? There's no reason that somebody would intentionally burn down an orphanage. But we got some bad intel, and the orphanage was next to another building that we thought was housing some weapons of war. I mean, we didn't want to burn down the orphanage, but you see, there was this demon, because demons are allowed to be exclusively evil, and if they were able to take you see, no, I'm from the future, and I know that one of those orphans is actually evil. No, I'm not bad. I'm not the bad guy here. Thousands of people die in the future from one of those orphans. I don't know which one. I can't know which one. And if I wait to see which one, it'll be too late. I'm doing this to save you. That's a villain arc. That's how you write a villain. I'm doing this for the good of everybody. Now, if you're a player character villain, you probably want to be a little bit less evil. Like, even in that situation, that is getting into cartoonish levels of villainy. But again, the fascist villain, the conquistador, who believes that if they only had the reins of control, they could stop everybody else from being hurt. Now you have a compelling character, right? And this leads to fantastic levels of development. If you're playing an evil character, having a character develop throughout the times and the sessions that you're playing them, they might come to terms with their evil nature, or recognize that and try to change it, or maybe they double down and say, no, what I'm doing is right. No, look, if we let all these petty kings rule, there'll be millions of years of war. If I am the one true High King, there will never be another war again. That is a good way of writing a villain. And for a protagonist, and again, what is their want? Their want is unification, or global recognition of faith, or to save the world in their eyes. Now, you can write characters that are wrong. This is something I was going to get into later, but I'm going to get into it now. You can, and probably should, at least sometimes, write characters that are wrong. That is to say, characters that believe the wrong things. It's very easy to accidentally fall into the Mary Sue trap. And I don't mean like the traditional fanfic Mary Sue, where you are writing and your writing is just, oh, they're perfect in every way, except, I mean, that is something that you need to be conscious of. But I mean, all the information they have is perfect. Because all the information people have isn't perfect. And we see that more and more nowadays than we have ever before. But what if your character is working off of false information? I watched a fantastic... I've played a lot of the Final Fantasy games in the past. I just watched a fantastic video about Final Fantasy IV last night. We watched it in the Discord channel. And it really highlights that. Like, are we the bad guys? What is something gone wrong here? Is the character development of, oh no, I think that we might be a villain in this situation. And developing that out over time until you can reach a moment of change, a genuine moment of change for your character. What does Cecil from Final Fantasy IV want? He wants to be a good knight. He wants to be a good knight that upholds the values of his king. What does he need? He needs to recognize that the king's values don't align with his own. And again, this is how you can build up a character. It's funny because you see... Hold on, let me check through chat here real quick. Good and evil are all just points of view relative depend on the person who told the history of his life. Yeah, and having somebody be told a history, having somebody be told and fed a false history is a good way of building up that character as being incorrect, and somebody who has an opportunity to learn later on. Or to double down if they are going to be a villain, right? Now, this isn't to say you can't write a force of nature villain. There are phenomenal force of nature villains, and those operate on different levels, and they can be extremely difficult to pin down. For those of you who don't know, a force of nature villain is a villain that is unabashedly evil, but also not human, or no longer human, or their mindset transcends what humans can understand. Cthulhu is one of the classic examples, right? How do you reason with Cthulhu? You don't. Cthulhu is beyond any human mind, and their ways are unknowable. Well, that can actually be a really weak enemy. That can actually be a really weak character unless you start fleshing out and doubling down on this concept, which Lovecraft does, that they're an unknowable evil that we can't comprehend, but we can see glimpses. We can see tiny glimpses of what their goals are. Kefka is a phenomenal force of nature villain because they start the game as a human and end the game as a force of nature. They change from being a human who has values and goals and hopes and end up being a god of nihilism who simply wants to destroy the world and erect a monument to non-existence. All that matters in their corruption is that the world must be destroyed because none of it is of value, nothing's worth saving, and if the world goes on, it'll only mean more suffering. The only way to end the suffering is to end everybody, and then that's terrifying, absolutely terrifying. That's a terrifying villain, but it does work. But anyway, that's just a real quick sidebar on force of nature villains, which do work well, but you have to build them up, right? People remember Kefka. People remember GLaDOS, who functions as a force of nature within Aperture. People remember, Sauron, who functions as a force of nature in, Lord of the Rings. They are simply a nature force who's almost given zero screen time, frankly, because their reach and their existence is enough of a antagonistic plot. Force of nature villains tend to be more just antagonistic forces, and you can just genuinely have forces of nature be a villain. And I'm not even talking about the Moana side where the villain is a literal force of nature, though that is cool. But the force of nature could just be a hurricane. It could just be the concept of warfare, and this, I forget the name of the game. But anyways, those are just some other concepts on villains. But let me go ahead back to the player character, or the, if not protagonist, then at least the characters of who need motivations, right? And again, you don't need to add motivations for every character in your world, but it would be a lot cooler if you did, right? The merchant wants to make money. Of course, they're just a merchant. Why wouldn't they? But what if the merchant has a reason to make money? What if the merchant has a want and a need? What if the merchant wants to raise money not for greed, but because they're trying to buy back a child from slavery? Because the merchant has this, want to never work again. Maybe their want is just the greed. They want to make enough money that they never have to worry about money again. What if their need is that they need to realize that the player character is worth funding even if they don't have money? Maybe that actually is an interesting plot point for your game. Taking what is otherwise just a merchant and turning them into somebody who the player is going to remember. And again, I'm going to harp on that. I'm going to repeat that. Because the player or the group remembering the character is very important. If it's a game, you want to remember the characters because that's what people will engage with. That's what people will write about, make fan fiction about. That's what people will take away from your game. D&D, the characters are the game, right? You want people to remember the character that you brought to the table 6 years from now when people are telling stories. You want to say, hey, remember that time that this character was around and what they, with them, they existed. Or remember that one NPC that we found in the dungeon. That sort of structure adds so much. Well, let me skim through the chat again because I've been neglecting it. You like chaotic neutral. It seems it feels more like a good way to express in the design step of the character. Motivated by personal. I think that chaotic neutral can be interesting, but I again, why would you say chaotic neutral instead of just making a character with a want and a need? Why instead of just making a character with a personality, right? Throw the concept of chaotic neutral over your shoulder and say, I'm making a person. I'm making a character. I am making somebody in this world who exists. You see what I'm saying? If you see wrestling, this is actually how it works. There's baby... Yeah, okay, fair enough. I think you have a lot of fun in writing a human character that does think of themselves as evil and are evil. That can be difficult. The storms in the movie Twister, yeah, literal forces of nature. Armageddon is another force of nature. What if the merchant needs money to live? That's just capitalism, baby. Yes, but no one's going to remember the merchant who needs money to live. Now, if the merchant literally needs money to live, if the merchant, the person who sells you things, is also, let's take the Deus Ex route and say they need money to pay. They need to pay for a fantasy medical transfusion or something. They need money for fantasy medicine, like in Deus Ex. Well, now the player might even feel guilty for not selling their stuff. Maybe the player feels guilty for not buying from them. Maybe maybe the player is going to remember that character, merchant. anyways. This idea of wants and needs doesn't need to apply to everybody, but it would be cooler if it did. The reason I keep on making that quote is because that was a quote I made in an actual game dev meeting, and with somebody, it was actually talking about hero's journey. They were saying that not every quest needs to follow some form of the hero's journey, and I'm like, you're right. But it'd be a lot cooler if you did. I'll do quest design sometime in the future, because that, I think, would be a really interesting stream as well. But. Find your character's heart. Now, a lot of people make characters that are purely reactive to the world. If your character exists purely as a reaction to the world, then they are just a piece of driftwood. When is that okay? That's okay in situations where there is a character insert, where that is a reader insert or a player insert. If you are playing, if you writing Twilight, people bash Twilight a lot more than it deserves. Quick sidebar: I'm not saying Twilight's good. I'm saying that it deserves better than people gave it. You know, I think that's a reasonable statement. Anyways, any young adult novel, right? Usually the main character is gifted in some way and just going along with the plot happening at them, as opposed to having the goals to drive the plot. The reason for that is not because they failed at making a character with wants and needs. It's because they want the reader to project their own wants and needs into the character. And that breaks down in two places. One, that breaks down when you are writing NPCs for a storyline. Because if the NPCs are also just being washed up in the plot and not having any agency or real development into it, then those NPCs are forgettable. Maybe the plot will be memorable, but the NPCs are forgettable in that case, and the goal is not to make forgettable NPCs. The other problem is in tabletop games. If you are doing as a D&D player, and you are just going to let the DM wash you along with the plot, then you aren't interesting. You don't have the dynamics. You're not bringing the dynamics to the table of an interesting character. You are not walking into the room and saying, okay, here's what I'm bringing to the table. You are walking into the room and saying, hey, what's the table bringing to me? And you can do that, but it puts a lot more pressure on the DM. It makes the game less interesting for everybody else at the table, frankly. But. How do you do this? Figure out a want and need. How do you figure out a want and need? Well, we'll get to that. Yeah, that's right. I'm building up. I'm making you guys stay for that. We got a good 15 minutes before I get to that part. You guys better strap in because we're just going on to backstory now. I'll get to that part later. I promise you. We'll get there. But I'm burying the lead right now. I just lost a viewer for that. Fine. Bye. I miss you. Please come back. Okay. Let's go into the past. Again, this has all been about the characters' present, their wants and needs. Let's talk about past. So that's their present. Let's talk about past. The Jade the Kobold. I mean, kind of, right? Backstory. Why is your character the way that they are now? Now, it doesn't need to be tragic, but like, I get it. I understand why people make tragic backstories. Because, like, trauma is a really good motivator. And to quote Jenny D, happy, well-adjusted characters usually don't become adventurers, right? Like, fair. That's reasonable. But the backstory does not need to be some dark tragedy. And I would prefer, especially if you have a table of multiple people, everybody should not have a tragic backstory. That's just silly. There was a game I played in this is a true story completely, in Shadowrun. And everybody made a tragic backstory. Everybody's character was super traumatic loner. Now, we were all sold that this is a cyberpunk world. We were all sold as this without knowing a lot about Shadowrun, just being told, oh yeah, it's a dark and gritty cyberpunk future. Capitalist dystopia. this was back in the 90s, and well, we basically are there now, so, but I'll put that aside, and say that everybody made a loner, and there was no party cohesion. And everybody wanted to go off and do the right. Like, there's no reason for the party to be together. And if you are making a loner in a team game, you need to know why they're a loner, and you need to know why they are not. This comes into Session 0 stuff. Probably my only favorite VTuber. Aw, thank you. Hello, Shammy. It's nice to see you here. Where is this here? Which is where I want to get into cooperative party building. Now, okay, let me finish my thoughts on backstory first. What are some other good backstories? I mean, maybe they have a quest. Maybe they have, like, some destiny or glory that they're chasing. Maybe there's a mystery that they need to solve. Like, you know, they found their grandmother's portrait, and on the back were GPS coordinates. Or not GPS, but, you know, longitude, latitude coordinates. Or maybe they picked up a sword one day, and the sword bound into their skin and told them, you must hunt for blood now. And the player's like, but I don't want to hunt for blood. And, well, the sword's going to kill them if they don't. You know, maybe there's something there for, you know, for something a bit darker if you want to go that direction. Maybe they're on a pilgrimage. Maybe they're on a literal pilgrimage, either religious or to just going into the town to pick up a power converter, right? Maybe there's something that's driving them from their home, either intentional or otherwise. What is driving the player to leave comfort? Because that's what it boils down to. That's what your entire backstory boils down to. Is why is the player leaving comfort? Are their parents dead? Okay, sure, maybe they need to, that's why. That can be fine if you want to do a tragic backstory. But maybe they just have nowhere else to turn. Maybe they are a town guard, and the town was destroyed. Their only skill is with a sword, so they become a sellsword. And that's how they became an adventurer. Maybe someone, you know, like, maybe they're just chasing ambition, right? Maybe they just want glory. Maybe they just, you know, want to go out there and become the strongest. But then what's their need? Again, you see where this is, you see those tying together. If they want to be the strongest, you still need to have the need, because the want is the external thing that they desire. The need is the internal thing that will help them reach their apotheosis as a character, that will help them develop their character, that will keep them interesting, grounded, and dynamic, that will build them up in the future. And building that into the backstory gives them a place to start. Maybe they're leaving for training. That was a classic storyline for druids. Druids used to be all about going out and questing to train and to collect samples or find people in the world who they can learn from. To become the best druid, you have to meet the other best druids in the world and train under their tutelage. That's the reason why they left their natural forest. That's the reason they left their safety. Why they left what was easy. Right? Try to avoid a passive reason. Sure, maybe it's a prophecy. Maybe they were told they have to go out here and slay the Dark Lord, but that way of driving the character still has to be the character's choice. Why did they choose to chase the prophecy? Why did they believe the prophecy? Why did they trust the person that gave the prophecy? What about the prophecy drove the character? If the prophecy is the backstory, sure. But then why did the character trust it? Again, you are making a person. You are making a character. Do you need a backstory for every NPC? No. But I do think you should have a want and a need for every NPC, unless that they are genuinely just filler. And obviously, yes, you can have some filler characters. But anybody who shows up, I would say, multiple times. If anybody who is in your base camp, if you will, or who shows up multiple times over the course of the game, probably should have a motivation. And that's really what this is boiling down to, is motivation. Because that's some good storytelling. Where's that quote? The need is what the hero must fulfill within himself to have a better life. It usually involves overcoming its weakness and growing in some way. I want to say it's John Truby. It's something it's a quote of about writing literature. Actually, hold on. Let me actually double check live. One brief moment. 7 key bits of story structure. Yeah, I had to read that book in college. I think. Anyways, regardless. Now, motivation is hard to come up with a lot of time, and I'm going to get to that. I'm going to get to ways to create motivations for characters. That's not easy. It's not easy. I am not saying that character building is easy. I'm saying that it's worth it. Again, think back to the characters in video games that you remember. You remember them because they had a motivation. You don't remember the random character in town. Unless it's like super memey, like unless it is, I like shorts that are comfy and easy to wear. Yeah, okay, fair, right? Fair. Like, yeah, in that case, yeah, you remember that because of a meme, not because of a depth of character. Who do you remember in Pokemon, though? Cynthia. A lot of people will say Cynthia right off the bat. You know, like, because, you know, she's a more developed character. Or, you know, yeah, even N for that matter. Like, developing characters ends up making things that stick with players. And you can give a backstory and wants and needs to every single NPC. Disco Elysium does it, and there's a reason it's won so many awards. That, like, it's phenomenal. Okay, so. Here's where I wanted to make one separate point about this for tabletop players. Guzmo, cool. Yeah. The plot is up to the GM, but the theme is up to the players, right? The plot and what is happening in the world and what is driving the characters to do things is up to the GM. But the theme of how the characters go about it, how the characters feel about that world, and what the characters are trying to fulfill in their needs is up to them. And the players will, with any competent GM, the players will change the plot because the players will, by just existing, if they have good characters and good personalities, not be led along. The players will work in the way that they want towards what their goals are. And here's the hard part. Again, you have that external want, right? But you also must know the internal need. And you must also recognize that your character does not know their internal need. But you, the player, the actor, the story writer, need to know that so that you can drive them towards it. Do you see how that works? You, the player, should want to make your character's own progression interesting. Which means that you are going to need to find a way to have them chase their want while coming across their need. And I will get into examples of this in a little while. Okay. Now, what's in the way is up to the GM, right? What the base plotline is up to the GM. Their want is known to them, and you know the need, but the character doesn't. And here's where it becomes more role-playing and acting. And here's where, if you're taking this for writing advice, is where your difficulty is going to come in. I define a Mary Sue not just as a character that's written as perfect, which is the traditional definition. I also define a Mary Sue as a character who has no conflict between wants and needs. And this is something that you see people fall into a lot when writing. Because if the character's wants and needs are the same thing, if the character wants the crown and they need the crown, cool. That's a linear story. That has no real dynamic pressure. That character isn't going to experience growth because they've already grown. They already know what they need. They already know what they want and what they need, and if they succeed in getting their wants, congratulations, they won. That's just a linear progression. It's not interesting. It's not dynamic. It doesn't make for good TV. That's what it boils down to, right? That's kind of is what it boils down to. So. Remember that your character can and sometimes should be wrong. One of my characters that I wrote a long time ago was an evil character, in the sense that they didn't understand the difference between right and wrong. They didn't have a moral compass. They didn't have anything that guided them towards saying you should help people, because they were very young and didn't understand. They didn't have a natural empathy. They weren't evil in the sense that they would kick puppies, but they didn't have the natural empathy that people have. And they were raised to praise the Rainbow Mother, who was Tiamat. They were literally raised as an acolyte of Tiamat. And their evilness came through in like, well, why wouldn't we stab those guards? They were stopping us from entering town. Well, the rest of the party would come and say, hey, wait, no, those are town guards. The last people... No. Well, we stabbed the last people who stopped us from going somewhere. No, those were bandits. They were asking for, extortionist toll money. But why wouldn't we stab these guys too? See, that's an evil character that is evil because they are confused. They don't understand empathy. They don't understand that nature of, of helping somebody out. They are wrong. What is their want in that character? They wanted to find another clan because they were a kobold. And their entire clan was slaughtered. There's your tragic backstory for the day. What they wanted was to find a new clan. What they needed was to learn to survive on their own and learn how to support people while still being a part. How to support a group and become a part of it, rather than just a follower. That was what they had developed with over time, was this idea of how can I become somebody. Interesting, right? How can I become somebody who can participate in this group and become a member of the team? Now, future. Remember, I'm just categorizing this past, present, future. Future is character development, and that's where the character goes from when the story starts to when the story ends. And sometimes afterwards, depending on how much you want to leave that up to the player or how much of that you want to write. Development is more about how do we make how do we get from point A to point B? How do we get the player to go from their want into their need? How do we get the character to have a character arc? How do we get the character to finish their own hero's journey? And that's sort of what I've been talking about recently. I'm just actually putting in the proper framing right now. It's where is the character's heart, and when something happens to them, how do they react? And when they react that way, what is there to push them and drive them towards their needs? Now, you should work, if this is tabletop, you should be working with your GM on this. They will help. Ideally, they will help because they should want the characters to be interested, the characters to reach their goals. But more importantly, your goals for the character rather than the character's goals. Does that make sense? It's not so much what it's the character's wants and needs. Watch any classic Disney movie, right? Go watch Zootopia or Robin Hood, or go watch any of the classic Disney movies, and you'll see what the kind. You look for it. It's even called an I Want song. Just honestly, just Google I Want song, and you'll see a million resources saying because almost every Disney musical has one. It's the I Want song is the part of a musical where the character sings about what they desire. I mean, Ariel, I want more, right? Yeah. Okay. Second here. All right. Where am I? Nobody will remember her because she crushed me. There you go. Nice. And yeah, misguided evil is a thing. All right. So. Where do you start? Yeah, that's right. I'm finally getting that thing I promised her 40 minutes ago. First of all, you should start thinking about. Well, okay. Let's explore a couple ways. A character is a set of strengths and aspirations, right? Flesh them out by adding relationships and history, get an interesting personality, write the backstory based off of the responses and reactions that you've created. Build out a character. What are some ways of going about this? The first one I want to discuss is going from inside out, which is where you start with the core theme that you want to explore with this character. You start with the core thematic element that you want to get to at the end. Again, remember, inside is the need, outside is the want. So you start out with what is the character's need, and then what does that mean that their want should be, and if you have the need and the want, you can extrapolate everything else based on how you want it to go. An example of this is my character I played in the one-shot recently, Chive. My focus there was to make a character who didn't have a want. Because usually it's the other way around. Usually characters will have a want and the player will not think about their needs, about what they need to actually advance and develop as a person. I wanted to go the opposite way. I wanted somebody who had nothing to live for. That's really what the Chive is as a character, is I started with a character who didn't really have a want. They're just a drifter. They're going from day to day, and they don't have anything that they want. Well, what's their need? They need to love themselves. And they can't find that inside themselves. What they need is they need to be part of a group that will show him compassion. And that, well, I didn't quite get as far into that as in the one shot, because it was a one shot, frankly. But that was what I wanted to build towards. And I did write a story that I was originally going to voice act and get voice acting from all the other people in the one shot, but I don't know if I will, because I mostly wrote that for myself to finish Chive's character arc. But I wanted to, but the core of that is I started out with what is the character's, is like, what do I want to explore thematically? What is the core need, or what is the core want? It's like, for Chive, I want to explore the concept of a character who didn't have anything that they wanted, but who's had a very clearly defined need. What are some other stuff you can do? Okay, well, what's something that somebody might need? Again, pick any Disney movie. Pick any good movie, right? Pick any well-known movie, and you'll be able to find ideas. You don't necessarily want to rip them off wholesale, but throw some ideas in chat. What are some ideas to explore from the inside out? Take a character and start with what you want to develop. What do you want to develop in the character? Space Jam. Sure. Let me remind myself on Space Jam's core plot. It's been a hot minute since I've seen that. Jeez. Yeah, that's right. Michael Jordan wants to just fight and win a game of basketball. He just wants to play the game he's always known and just win, go home. What he needs is to recognize the individual values of his teammates, is to recognize what each of his teammates can do. And it changes from just give the ball to Mike into how can Mike work with the team, and eventually how can Mike become a toon himself. The final scene, spoiler alert, is his arm extending as if he was a cartoon himself. Sure, why not? Why not? What does my character want? Food. What does my character need? Constant supervision. Okay, I don't know about it. That's not necessarily a development, though. But, I mean, what does my character want? Food. What does my character want? Survival. That's fair. That's a good starting point. What does my character want? They want survival. They're just trying to live. What does my character need? Going with what you're saying, is companionship. They need someone who can both look after them and that they can be a part of their life as well. Whether that's romance or romantic, whether that's romantic or not, I should say. can depend on how you're playing out the character, but that's a fantastic example. What does my character want? Food. What do they need? They need to belong. They need to be a part of someone else. How do you differentiate the roleplay part of playing a character with the mechanical combat parts of a character? I actually am going to get to that shortly. That's actually 2 steps down on my list here. Yeah, that's right. I got a list. I actually wrote these things out. I prepared for the stream for the first time. This might be the first chat stream that I actually wrote out my list and just didn't stream of consciousnesses the whole time. How do you build them as a character versus how do you build them within the rules? Now, that is a fantastic question that I will get to shortly. That was mostly your cheekly explanation to deal with a barbarian that thinks high risk, high rewards. Yeah, okay, fair enough. Back to, like, what does my character need? They need to learn the value of money. What do they want? They want to be rich. I don't know. Find something there. Work with the concepts. What does the character need? They need to learn that empathy, to learn that other people have feelings too, to learn that indigenous cultures have value and that you aren't going to, and that you destroying them isn't going to, or that you anglicizing them isn't going to make them better. Shrek, what does he want? He wants to be left alone. What does he need? Well, Shrek needs to get out of his stagnant lifestyle and see the open world. Shrek needs. What does Fiona in Shrek want? She wants to find a beautiful prince. What does she need? She needs to care about somebody for who they are. Again, it's everywhere. So that's starting from the inside out. Next is going from the outside in, which is actually what I did with the person who I was helping in this situation, because this person came to me, and I'll actually read through a bunch more of this stuff here, where is it here? What we worked with is they started out saying they wanted to play a King's Ranger, and how do I make him not super generic? Working from the outside in is, what do other people think of your character? We started out with building that character by saying, you're thinking about making a King's Ranger. You're putting the class before the person, which is a problem sometimes. Not always, but sometimes. And start out by saying, okay, if that's what makes them, if that's your core design, and it can be that, if your core design is a merchant, if your core design is a fighter, if your core design, this can happen a lot in game design especially, more so than tabletop. If your core design is, if your core design is from the outside in, it's what do other people see you as? What do you need to be for them, or for the plot, or for your game dev, right? Instead of saying, I need to make a King's Ranger, say, okay, what does the king call you for? What is the king asking for when they call you? Council, send for this person. I need their skills. That can help you develop from the outside in. And then once you have that, you can start to flesh out the needs and wants in other places. Like, Council, send for this person. We need them because they're expendable and we don't want to waste anybody on this mission. Council, send for this person because they're the best tracker in the land. Council, send for this person because they X. Because what? Because why? Because something. What is your character good at? What is their strength? What is your character good at? If going from the outside in is a good way of building a character in game dev, because frankly, that's what you need more, right? In game dev, you need a merchant and you want a story for the merchant. You need a quest giver, and the quest giver needs to have something. Okay, well, they need to be. This person is a farmer and who needs help. Okay, fine. What do they need help with? What we have to start from the outside in. What do other people think about the character? Why is the farmer farming? What do you do if your initial inspiration of a character is a joke? That's fine. That's completely fine. If your initial inspiration is a joke, that doesn't mean it needs to end as a joke. If your initial inspiration is a joke, that doesn't mean it has to end as a joke. You can still build a character out of what starts out as a joke. And it's actually very common in tabletop games for that to happen. There's a fantastic comic about, where session 1 the joke character is laughing around. Session 45 the quote unquote joke character is crying and avenging to promising to enact revenge for one of their allies. Like, that is not uncommon, but the thing is, you still need to take that path of saying, what are their wants and needs, right? And if you start as a joke, you don't always want to end as a joke. And if you do want to end as a joke, then with a clown, yeah, exactly, Tezzy. And if you do want to end as a joke, the question is why, frankly. The question is do you want, and the question is, should your joke have depth? And again, I think they should. Joke characters that have depth are great. Dan Hibiki is a joke character. Dan Hibiki has a genuinely heartwarming story. Like, people love Dan Hibiki for good reason, because he's a joke character. But he's not just a joke character. He's also an interesting character. Modern examples. Sans Undertale. Literally a joke character, and is literally written with the intent of being a joke on Comic Sans. His name is Sans. He's a comic. It's a font. It's a font. It's just the Comic Sans font. It's a joke about the font. That's it. I just ruined Undertale for you. That's the character who starts as a joke. But if you play Undertale, you realize that there's more to the character than that. If you've played Undertale, you know full well that Sans is their own character, has their own development, and becomes a very interesting character, especially near the end, because they have connections, because they have wants, because they have needs, because they have a motivation. That doesn't mean they can't be a joke. That doesn't mean that the joke is all they are. It just means that the joke is a starting point for building an actual character. Now, my current main D&D character started as a joke, and he's currently your longest running and one of your favorite characters. Yeah, great. That's fantastic. How do I work around building a character when you feel you need to play them to understand where you want to take them? That's a fantastic question. I will be getting to that. But first, I'm actually going to be answering... Whose question was that? So anyways, let me finish this thought here first about outside in. So yeah, the king needs a blank. He sends for you. A beast expert. Somebody who's expendable. A brilliant tracker. What is that your character's good at? Now, this is good because it lets you build a character, sort of what was it being asked before, about how do I build a character that around an outside concept, right? I want to build a berserker. Okay, fine. Why? Then you start from the outside in. What is it about being a berserker that drives this character? Okay, cool. If they're a berserker, how do they feel about it? Do they hate themselves when they go berserk? Do they feel that it's necessary, but they have to? Or do they love it? Do they find joy in just the surrender and surrendering to madness? Like, maybe there's something in there that can be fleshed out, and that's really what it's about. It's about finding a point and then building on it. It's about fleshing out a small concept into a greater one, into something interesting. Ways of continuing this would be, to work on. If you're going to work from the outside in, then the next questions become more specific, right? Hey, I want to make a character who's naive. Okay, cool. Well, you walk down a hallway and trip over a bucket. Oh no, there was paint in that bucket. What's your reaction? How does that character feel about that? And then once you know how the character feels about certain situations, you can start to think about why do they feel that way. And that's where you start to develop the needs on the outside-in approach. Because the goal is to get the needs and wants. That's kind of the goal. If you're starting with the needs and wants, you need to flesh out. You need to go out and start to plan out what that means and what are the backstories and connections and ways that you're going to go about that. Going from the outside in says, okay, I have a character I want to play. How do I find their wants and needs? I think that tabletop players will resonate more with the second one, and writers will resonate more with the first one, and game devs will resonate more with the next ones, which is mechanics first. And this was the one that someone specifically asked about a little while ago. Who asked about that again? Where is it? I think it was, yeah. It was Logan, wasn't it? Yeah. Yeah. I think it was. Anyways, the question was, oh, well, whatever. The next idea is mechanics first. Find a mechanic that character needs to be, that it needs to exist as. If you're writing a story, maybe you need to like have a certain plot device trigger, and you want to give them a personality for it to work. If you're making a game, it's this character needs to fulfill this role in the game. That's the first and foremost property. How do I write a character that fills that property? In tabletop, it might actually, this is how I tend to build characters myself. It's what's a cool gimmick mechanic that would be fun to play with, that would be fun mechanically to play with, and then how do I make a character around it? The way you handle this is you ask yourself who would use that mechanic. Who would decide that mechanic is their preferred method of handling, of existence, of using. I made a character named Abaddon, and they were a mechanics first character. The mechanic was that if you combine a couple of classes, you could create really fancy lose-lose situations for the enemies. Quite literally, if they attacked me, I backlashed and hit them for a lot of damage. If they didn't attack me, they had massive penalties to hit, and I smote them for massive damage. The idea was that I could pick one enemy, isolate them, and put them in a lose-lose situation. Who does that? Well, there's someone who has a bit of a streak of cruelty, isn't it? Because this is putting somebody in a situation where they're setting up somebody to fail. You're making somebody fail. I decided to make them a demon. I'm like, okay, this is a trap. They're creating a trap for these individuals, but forcing the individual to make the choice. It's like, and that also could be almost a pacifist style. You could say stand down there as well. It's like, okay, attack me and I'll destroy you. Attack anybody else and I will destroy you. I could have made that an angel, frankly, but the path I ended up going was a demon who liked these ideas of bargains, of saying, hey, would you like to make a bargain? And that was an interesting character because I ended up fleshing out what their goals and what their needs and what their wants were. Their goals, their want was souls, to be blunt. They wanted other people's souls. They wanted to help people in return for taking their soul. What they needed was to recognize they needed to recognize what humanity meant. They needed to recognize the concept of humanity. That's what made them an interesting character in the end, was that they started to realize and grow past what their want was. Like, I need to take their soul, but I don't really need their soul. Like, it's more important, this is gonna, yeah, in the long run, this is gonna be better for me and my people. Okay, and then slowly over the time, over various sessions, they came to these realizations. So from mechanics first, starting with mechanic, merchant. Okay, cool. Why are they a merchant? Okay, mechanic. They're a giant. It's a giant boss. They're just a giant enemy who takes up 3 stories of screen space. Cool. Why are they giant? Okay, how do they feel about that? What kind of character, what kind of character would be giant is kind of trite, of course, but still fitting. And what it would, that they want. Well, maybe they're just hungry. Maybe they're giant and they need a lot of food. Maybe they are just trying to, maybe they don't notice you. Maybe it genuinely is that they're swatting at gnats because they don't care about something that's so tiny. You are an ant to them. Maybe they are a god and they know that you are a creature, but you are still an ant to them, and they think nothing more of smiting you than they would swatting an annoying fly. Right? These are how you can start with the mechanics first. And then you flesh it out. Okay, they're swatting at flies. Do they have a set of wants and needs? Well, sure. But their wants and needs might not associate with, with something that the players can comprehend. They can get into that force of nature trap, especially if you're going with a very large, enormous creature. That can become another force of nature trap. Or not trap, but another force of nature character. But merchant. Why are they a merchant? Why are they selling things? Why are they following the character around? Do they have a crush on the character? Wait a minute, this merchant keeps on showing up at the beginning of every level. Why would that merchant show up at the beginning of every level? Oh my goodness, that merchant has a crush on the main character. They want the main character's attention. They want to romance the main character. What are their needs? They need to admit it. They need to find a way to confess. You know, oh wow, I just made your generic merchant, your generic recurring character merchant, a potential love interest? Oh, now that could be interesting. Now you've got a character, right? Now you've got a character. Dark Souls has some great mechanics first characters. True. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Artorias, Sif, yeah, Ornstein and Smo are mechanics first characters. Ornstein and Smo, the mechanic is how can we get the player to fight two creatures at the same time that are asymmetrical, that are different in one combat arena. Okay, cool. What is there? How do you extrapolate the kind of characters that would do that? Well, they're both fighting the player. They're both guarding something, right? So if we can have them be guardians, sworn oath protectors, okay, sure. Sworn oath protectors works. What is their motivations? Well, the motivations is to protect something. What are their, what is their needs? Well, that's again, you don't necessarily need that for every single villain. I think it's harder to do there, but like, you could do something like that. But the thing is, you don't need to tell the player either, right? You don't need to tell the player what the needs are. It's entirely possible that Ornstein and Smo have needs. I did an entire stream on iceberg design. Go watch it. I'll put a link to it up in the top corner if I remember. I won't remember, but I might. But the idea of developing beyond what the player sees. Now, which is going to go dovetail very nicely into the next way of starting a character, which is prompts. One of my friends works off of artwork as a prompt. They will find a piece of artwork, and they will start making a character based on the artwork they find first. And then, once they've started making the character based off the artwork, based on what they see in the artwork, then they'll make it their own by going through these same processes, right? But it's still the same process of either inside out or outside in. It's still either what is the character trying to accomplish, and what does that mean, or what is the character driving towards, and how does that affect the character? But this gives you a starting point. This gives you a springboard to go with. And artwork can be a great springboard. So can movies, so can TV shows. Don't be afraid to steal. If I took Han Solo and put him into a D&D setting, and I took some of the concepts of and wants and needs and character development and character designs that go into Han Solo, you wouldn't recognize them, because that's using the tropes. But then I would take those tropes and I would apply them differently, just by the natural course of being in a D&D world. The same motivations can exist, but the character result will end up differently. It'll still be your character at the end of the day. You're aping the character. You're not going to rip them off wholesale. You're not going to take every single aspect of them. But you can take that as a starting point. You can steal a character's personality as a starting point and develop that out into your own character. Starting from another character, or starting from artwork, or starting from a zodiac sign. Maybe you want to look at a zodiac sign and say, hey, what does it mean to be a Leo? I have no idea. I don't know about zodiac stuff. Let me take a quick look here. People born in the sign of Leo are apparently natural-born leaders. They're dramatic, creative, self-confident, and dominant. Cool. Extremely difficult to resist. Neat. That's going to be a foundation for a character. That can be a starting point. Take that. Think about the world that they're going to be plopping them into and say, okay, well, if they're a natural-born leader, then let's start with that. They are a leader. Okay. What are they a leader of? What is it fitting for them to be a leader of? What do they want? Do they want to lead? Do they want to abjure the crown but feel that they can't? Do they need to abjure the crown? Do they need to lead? Are they currently resisting their natural state? Are like Simba? Do they want to live the Hakuna Matata lifestyle and need to lead? Or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe they are a leader, but they realize that they need to abdicate because no one person should have the entire power of the sun, or whatever it is. See where this is going? It's taking that as a prompt and building upon it. Another one for prompts is Myers-Briggs. I mean, I'm sure several people in chat have opinions about the Myers-Briggs test. I'd be kind of borderline surprised if you didn't. Some people are all for it. Some people are think it's really dumb. But that gives you 16 different personality types that you can use and build off of. Let me pick one at random. I'll just pick the one in the middle, INFP. This one says it is gentle, sensitive, nurturing, helpful, flexible, realistic. Seeks to create a personal environment that is both beautiful and practical. Okay. Well, let's just slot that right into their needs. They need to create an environment that is practical and beautiful. Let's just slot that right into their needs. They need to be gentle and sensitive and nurturing. Cool. Now we build that out. What's their wants? Well, it has to contrast. It has to be similar enough that the development of one can build into the other, but it has to be different enough that it can be evolution as opposed to a straight line. So let's have them be abrasive. Let's say that they got too many bad breakups and are really caustic. They're really, sassy all the time. Well, this person's their need is to be gentle and sensitive, and to cultivate a warm environment, but they're working against themselves. They're self-destructive right now because they want to, they've been hurt too many times. Their want is to push people away. Their need is to not and to do something different. Again, this is just spitballing. This stuff. None of this stuff I've prepared at all. This is all off the cuff. Or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe you take that Myers-Briggs, that's ISFP actually, the ISFP character from Myers-Briggs and say, okay, well, what if that's their want? What if they want to be gentle and sensitive and nurturing? What if they want to create a private, personal environment that's beautiful and practical? But what they need is to lead. What if they need to be the one to command the army? What if they need to stand up for themselves and not be as sensitive? What if being sensitive is going to hurt them and hurt other people as well? Maybe there's a character there too. The idea of a prompt is to get you thinking. It's not to hand you a character. It's to get you thinking about how you want to create motivations, about how you want to create wants and needs for your character. Do you see where I'm coming from? Do you see where I'm coming from? Vori says they have a 12-sided die with zodiac signs. That's actually pretty cool. And on that note, you can just, any random number you can just put into Google. I believe that you can type in Google random space 1-12 and it'll give you that, or 1-16 if you want to do the Myers-Briggs version. And there's many tables you can use. NPC creation tables can be used for character tables as long as you don't end the process where the table ends, right? Let me just do a quick Google search for NPC creation table. I'm just going to go to images and pick the first one that has numbers on it. Bam, done. What do we have here? I have no idea what this is. Let's see exactly what this is. Actually, you know what? Alright, talent. Random 1 dash, what was it? 1 to 20 for the NPC's talent. Sure, why not? This is all completely off the cuff. Because this is supposed to be off the cuff, right? This is... Actually, let me move myself over. Give this a little bit more room to speak. Random 1 to 20? Sure, random number generator. Perfect. Go. Does that work? 7. I have no idea what the site is. This is just the first one on Google. Alright, 7. Great at solving puzzles. Okay. Well, let's make a note of that. They're great at solving puzzles. Sure, why not? Mannerisms. 1 to 20. 11. They make constant jokes or puns. Well, let's combine these two things. They make jokes and they make puns all the time. They're a trickster. And they also are great at solving puzzles. They're a puzzle-solving trickster. Well, right, sounds like we have a Fae character right here, right? Sounds like we have somebody who's going to take that Fae aspect of, or maybe even a Sphinx. Maybe they're the one, setting forth the puzzles. Okay, well, let's keep going. Let's see here. Interaction traits, 1d12. Number between 1 and 12? Go. 6? Sure, they're friendly. Why not? Ideals. Good ideal, evil ideal. Again, good and evil is a really dumb way of establishing a character, but I'll roll with it for now. 4. They believe in life. Okay, so we can reinforce this idea of Fae. Maybe they think of making puns as creating verbal puzzles. I like that. I like that a lot. That's a really good way of handling it. If they see puns as verbal puzzles, then that can be the way they're dovetailing these two things together. And the question is, who would do that? Again, this is using this as a prompt. Who would see puns and puzzle solving as virtues? My mind goes to some sort of either a trickster spirit, like, a coyote, or a fae creature, a trickster. Someone who likes life, that can dovetail very nicely into the fae, and their negative ideal is 3, might. So they are a might makes right character. Okay, so they believe in the good of life, but they also believe that life needs to earn its goodness. You see where this is going. This is just using these random prompts to build a character, and then we ask ourselves, who would this character be? What would this character want? What does this lead to? And then we get into motivations. Okay, we have a Fae trickster who is upbeat, friendly, outwardly friendly, maybe not actually friendly. Who are they? What's their wants? Well, their want might just be open fun. Maybe their want is just hedonism. They just want to have fun all the time. What is their need? Well, that'll depend on the context of the rest of the world and the rest of the characterizations of everything else involved. Maybe their need is to be more serious. Or maybe their need is to find a way for fun to balance. Maybe their need is to find a way to make their fun productive instead of destructive. That could be a very interesting prompt. So this is all about random adaptation. It's adapting from a randomization point. Then we can start moving on towards my favorite part, which is answering weird questions. No, really. This is something that I do a lot of. This is something that I actually do a lot of. And that is, once you have a motivation, throw weird questions at the wall and see what sticks. What's their favorite food? Well, that's kind of a weird question, especially a weird one to start with. I don't know, maybe their favorite food is meat? Okay, why? If you have the money to spend on a room, what kind of room do they stay in? Do they stay at the cheapest one available? Do they camp outside the town? Would they feel more comfortable camping outside the town? Would they spring for the posh room because they can afford it, and frankly, they deserve it? What is their thought process behind it? And again, the actual answer isn't as important as the thought process behind it, right? Your character sees somebody being beat up on the street. Do they intervene? Do they not intervene? Do they help the guy out? Do they intervene but make sure that everybody knows that they intervened? Start asking random questions. Think about weird sideways things. In a modern setting, what apps are on their phone? Do they browse TikTok all day, or do they use their phone to record their thoughts for writing prompts? Do they use their phone to play games, or do they use their phone to listen to audiobooks? These kind of questions really help. Once you have a motivation, once you have a little bit to go off of, these are the questions that put you in the shoes of the character, that help you drive it. If you're an actor, this should all sound very familiar, right? If you're an actor, this is the kind of things that you do to help yourself get into a role. Is once you've read your lines, once you've read your script, once you've figured out some of the character's motivations, you start thinking about, well, if I'm playing Loki, I'm not playing Loki, to clarify, then what would they do if they heard a baby crying really, really loud? And then you have to answer that yourself, and the way that you answer that question will help you understand the role, the character. the NPC, the merchant, the boss, the other players at the table. These are what help you flesh out a character. These are the things that help you polish a character. Once you have a character with a little bit of past, present, and future, again, with the backstory with wants and needs and an idea of where you want to take development, then you start working on what's their home life? When they go home, what's their home like? Who lives there? Do they live alone? Who do they live with? Do they have any pets? This is where you start getting into those little meat and potatoes of the character that really helps fill out the gaps in your own knowledge. Not just the gaps of the character, the gaps in your own knowledge of the character. This is where I consider this is one thing that I feel is neglected almost wholesalely outside of acting. If you're an actor, I'm sure you've heard this before, and I'm sure you've done this, right? You've figured out how some of these little... Just put your character in a coffee shop, AU. Let's be honest here. And what do they order? You know, put your character in a weapon shop. How do they feel? Put your character on site at a hanging. Why are they there? Or how did they get to there? Or what led them to be on the gallows? These strange questions that are completely not in your story. None of this stuff is necessarily going to be in your story. You might work it into your background, you might not, doesn't matter. But the idea is that these questions help you flesh out and polish the emotions of the character. Help them plan out who they are. Does that make sense? Ginny D, fantastic channel. I actually hadn't heard of Ginny D until like 2 weeks ago, and I've been just kind of binge watching a bunch of her stuff. Love it. Made a few videos for making characters where she asks questions in an in-character POV situation, like a doctor asking you about yourself while being treated or interviewed by a bard. That's fantastic. Yeah, that's the same idea of what I'm saying here, effectively. I hadn't seen that, so I'm going to still claim that I came up with this. But similar idea, though. Before I go, so in a few moments, I'm going to be taking on a guest. We've already planned this out beforehand. They have an idea for a character, and they want to flesh it out together. Before I do that, I want to talk about cooperative party building. This is something I am an extremely strong believer in. And that is creating the present and the future of the character. Again, the wants and needs, and the idea of where you want to take development. And only touching on enough of the past to give an idea of where they came from and to give them a little bit of a history. But not finishing it. Taking the past up to about 5 years ago. Okay? Take the history up to 6 months ago, wherever it's relevant for the party. And then sit down with your party and discuss together how the people met in the past tense. So have everybody ready to roleplay and say, hey, as the GM, you should be prompting this. And if this is for game dev, if this is for a PC game or a writing prompt, get friends and do this in a room. Like say, hey, you're going to be playing this character, you're going to be playing this character. Hand out, notepad notes with the character stuff on it, and turn it into a tabletop session for an hour. Make it a meeting. People actually enjoy coming to your meetings. No, seriously, it's actually kind of cool when you send out a memo that you want to have a meeting, and people are like, "Oh, nice, I'm hyped for that." Like in an office environment, that's how you know you're winning. That's how you know you're winning in office. Anyways. As the GM, you prompt questions about how they got together. Hey, isn't that how Adventure Time is written? Yes, that is correct. Isn't that go into there and say, hey, how did you two characters meet? And then give the players as little time as possible, and ideally with people who have some improv training, have them come up with like, we met when I was in the army. My character's a noble. Yes, I was their guard. Like, have them come up with backstory together and say, yeah, we worked together for the past 5 years. Oh, that's interesting. How did you meet the rogue? Okay, but not just how did you meet, though. Get a little bit more specific there. Say, as the GM, say, wow, but rogue, you were on the opposite side. How did you end up working with them? Establish that, and then have the character flinch and say, oh, wait, that's an interesting question, and have to come up with something on the spot. Build the party together. Parties that all meet in a tavern disjointed need to have a reason to be working together. And if that reason is money, you don't have a really good party dynamic, unless you find one. You can find one. If you watch the one-shot, the party dynamic between Piffle and Chive, I think, worked itself out. Between Remmel and Chive, worked itself out on the spot. That was flawless. Remmel and Chive, two characters, they were both detectives. One was the drunk, half Columbo, half Disco Elysium detective. The other was actually just a genuine good Magnum PI detective. Look, I'm old, deal with it. And the characters worked out great. That can work. But with cooperative character building, you get the team together and say, hey, what is your relationship to them? And you can establish early on in a slightly more structured way. I met them through this. I met them, we got together here. And you can create a more cohesive party because you are creating a party that has worked together for years. You see what I'm saying? You're creating a party with their own integrated backstory. And that is gold. That's where the gold comes from. I'm doing that in a game coming up. Me and another character have already started working on some backstory stuff together, where my character is a sort of a disgraced deity in a sense, and their character is one of the remaining acolytes. What my character in that situation needs is, well, okay, I'll just talk about that character. The character's name is Asana, and she was a good, kindly warlock patron. Not a warlock, they were the patron. Asana is a patron who drew power from followers who made a blood pact with her. And in the backstory, all of the people who followed her were purged, were killed, were executed. And I worked with with one of the other players in that group to figure out, what the character's wants are. The character wants to rebuild their flock, to have a bunch of followers again, to rebuild a small, tight-knit, exclusionist community. What do they need? They need to branch out and see the world. They need to see what exists outside of the little piece of world that they've explored themselves. And those are going to be the conflict of the character. And what the other players is like, okay, I was planning on playing a protecting warrior already. What if my character was your champion? What if my character, it was one of your acolytes, and then still is, did not die with the rest of them? Okay, well, that's an interesting dynamic. That's an interesting establishing setup there. And you build that together, so these two characters are going to have history together. The idea of cooperative party building is building an existing history that all the players and the GM can all play off of. And frankly, if we had more time if the one-shot characters were going to be for a full campaign, we could have actually written little vignettes of what happened with Remmel and Chive. The idea of them being, rivals and throughout history. You could have, and where you go from here is you say, as the GM, tell me a story. What happened to you two? How did you two meet in college? Were you taking the same classes? Again, if it's a more modern era. Or, well, not necessarily. There were colleges all the way back through history, but you see what I mean. Either way, if it is a modern era, then what do you think of the other person's social media profile? Like, that could actually just be a genuine question in a Shadowrun game, right? Like that can, and that will help the players realize what they think of each other. Right? That'll help the players realize what each player thinks about each other player, establishing a backstory, establishing connections. And then you can weave some of these needs and wants together. Again, what is happening is up to the GM. Their want is known, but your needs are your characters. You drive the theme of the game as the players. And if this is for a game dev, same thing applies, right? take these characters, put them in a room together, figure out a bunch of these development slots, so these interweaving backstories. Once you have the interweaving backstories, then you know who the characters are, right? And then you can ask them more sideways questions. You can ask them more strange, oddball questions like, have you ever dated one? Oh, there's a question. If you have like a group of 5 people, they say, hey, point at one character and say, hey, is your character, assuming your character is not Ace, have you dated one of the other player's exes? Who is it, and what happened? You know, ask these questions that make the players improv out that scene. You can toss it later on if it doesn't flow. It doesn't have to be there. It doesn't have to be permanent. But it gives you a fleshing out point. It gives you something to build on for these characters' interpersonalities. It finds the character's heart. It finds the character's heart. Daily reminder that Oxford College is older than the Aztecs. True. And, yeah. Ancient philosophical, functionally colleges would go back to ancient Greek times, no less. All right. Let's see here. And I'm going to grab somebody, and we're going to do some of this in real time live. As soon as they join. There they are, and where are they? Trying to see you in the list. Did you? Oh, there you are. There. Hello, how do you do?
Hello, let me mute your stream. I'm hearing you twice.
Oh, you'll hear me more than that.
Alright.
How you doing?
I'm good.
Let me see if I can get you on reactive images here real quick. There you are. Hi, how you doing?
I'm sorry, I'm trying to move stuff on my desk so I can get back to my notes.
No worries.
Alright, what, James?
How you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing good. I'm a little scatterbrained today. How about you?
I'm doing fantastic. Have you been enjoying the stream?
Yeah, I've never been much of a note taker, and just in like, how long's it been? Like an hour and a half, I have taken like a page and a half of notes.
So go ahead and introduce yourself to everybody.
Hi, I'm Rook. I thought I was good at character creation until I joined Jade in playing D&D.
Oh, you need to put it like that. I mean, you don't sell yourself that short.
Yeah, no, I realized how kind of like relatively shallow my characters were after seeing like you and Chive and Pip. Like the characters, like Chive, Piffle, and I can't remember Willie's character's name off the top of my head.
That was Rimmel.
Rimmel. Yeah, seeing all of them, and it's like, oh, wow, I really did just like small angry squid man.
Understandable. All right, so keep in mind that several of us. I'm not sure about Willie, but I know that I have an actor's background. I literally have a degree in acting and have been in production. So like I am coming from a different direction from the average D&D player, and actually I don't know. Is Brig have an acting history? I don't know. Anyways, but like everyone has different things that they've learned, right? And you don't need to have a background in acting to play D&D. But role
Um,
playing and building up role playing, it helps, right? It does help.
yeah, I have a little bit of an acting background, about as much as you can say, as like I've been in a bunch of school plays, and then I was also in plays at my mom's church.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough.
So, and then also just like generally, like me and my friends would just goof off and I guess sort of improv on like bus rides because we had a really long bus ride to school.
Mm-hmm.
And watching shows like Whose Line Is It Anyway kind of gave us an idea to do
Amazing
things
show.
like that.
Real talk,
Yeah,
whose line is it anyway? Is all like just practice stuff. That's the kind of stuff that I've done in improv classes as warm-ups and like as just as ways of keeping your mind sharp, and they just turned it into an entire show. It's like that's brilliant, right? Like that's fantastic. I love it. So,
yeah.
what do you want to work on? Let's just start right here with the core question of where do you want to work on your current character, or do you want to scrap and start new?
Well, I'm not sure when I'll be playing Pithro again, so I think I'd like to work on the character I was telling you about, the new one.
Okay. Well, let's assume that I don't remember anything about that conversation, because I don't, and everybody else in chat is going to need to hear it too.
All right. I guess starting off with the most basic thing, the character's name is Raleigh, inspired by less relevant, but they are inspired by the IPSN Raleigh from Lancer, aesthetically. So that's where the name comes from. Um, Also, I'm from Carolina, and the capital of Carolina is, or North Carolina is Raleigh.
Huh. Well, doxing yourself aside,
I
I will
it's just
say
a
that
state. I don't think they're going to be able to find me that easy.
maybe I don't know. I will say though that the name is usually the last thing. Like the name is the least important thing, right? That's
Yeah, name's superficial.
mhm.
But the
So we.
character Raleigh, I just wanted to get that out of the way so people knew who I was talking about when I said Raleigh.
Mhm.
Uh, the character kind of started off as two jokes and a Bionicle reference. Uh, so first joke was, very tiny thing with big sword. Because I got the idea for that from playing things like Elden Ring and Dark Souls, and I pick up the biggest sword I can find every time. Um, and then so that's where the tiny thing with big sword came in. And then the other joke came from them releasing the when they first released the UA for Spelljammer and they had auto gnomes.
Mhm.
Me and some friends were in a VC together, and one of us saw it. And my friend Vidri was like, "Robolds," and it because there's that whole trope. Is it a trope? Kobolds hating gnomes.
Yeah.
Um. So
Mhm.
yeah, and then I thought arms race. So and that was like months ago, and I'd forgotten about the joke because we thought, yes, um, kobolds build more robots to counter the gnome robots, and I'd forgotten about it. And then Kashak messaged me something about fighting the gnomes. I remembered the joke, and I was like, yes, I want to do something with this. And homebrewed an actual, like, I guess player, however, player race for robolds. And
I mean, you could just
then
take the existing one and reskin it and be done, right? But that doesn't matter as much, right? We're gonna focus
yeah,
on
no,
their personality. So this character is a robot, is what you're saying?
yeah,
Yes, or is
yeah,
it a mech suit sort of thing?
they're a robot.
Okay.
And then Kashak had, I was talking to Kashak about the character, and I had this idea. Here's where the Bionicle reference comes in. If you know anything about Bionicle, you probably know about the Toa, but if in case you don't, the Toa are like, they come in sets of 6, but there's like hundreds of them. And spoilers for like a discontinued series from 2002. Um, so But the Tella, the important part of this reference, are these guardians who wash up on the beach in canisters and remember nothing. At least the first set. The first 6 don't remember anything about where they came from and anything, and they wash up on the beach in canisters. And Bionicle's always been a series that's important to me, and I thought, hey, here's my chance. So I had the idea that Raleigh washes up on the shore in a canister and has no idea why they're there. And Shock was talking to me about the character at one point and brought up the idea of them being from Mechanus, which is something I had considered because robots in a fantasy setting, and Mechanus is just as a concept already there. And kind of what I've got so far is they're from Mechanus. They were like defender, like one of the defenders, like in the machinery and stuff.
Okay.
And
let's first of all, let's put a pin in that.
all right.
And first of all, I want to real quick call out a couple of pros and cons that I'm already hearing.
All right.
You're definitely working backwards, right? You're working from ideas of what the character is going to look like aesthetically, as opposed to who the character is internally, right? Do you see that?
Yeah.
So I would say that is a con. The pro is that you have a clear vision, which is something that we can work with. The pro is that you have a very good idea of the direction here, of where you want to end up, but you're starting at the end and trying to backfill something into what you want it to become. That's what I'm hearing? Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong.
Okay.
I didn't think about it like that.
So let's, for now, and keep all of your backstory in mind, okay? And let's nuke it. We'll come back to it. We'll add it in when it's relevant. But let's focus on the past, present, future, right? And we want to focus on present. And we're gonna go outside. We're gonna go out. How do you want to go? Inside out, outside in, mechanics, or prompts? We already have some prompts here, which I think would work, but all these are fantastic ways of going about different things.
I think since I started out going backwards, maybe the closest to starting at the beginning is kind of weird of a way of putting it. Maybe outside or inside out, I guess. Like, yeah, inside out. I'm sorry, I'm like fumbling over words.
Oh, you're doing great. Don't worry about it. So, then let me ask you, what do you want to explore with this character? When you make this character, when you bring this character to the table, what is the hero's journey? What emotional impact do you want to find with this character? What is your goal for narratively?
I was gonna get to that with the Mechanist thing, but I guess summoning up was like the idea of the character is like the question: what do you do when the purpose you thought you had is not your purpose? Or how do you like find a purpose?
Okay, so is the character Okay, so let me ask you a couple questions building off of that.
All right.
So where you want to go is you want them to find a purpose? Or do they even want to find a purpose?
I have the idea that the character wants to find a purpose, but whether or not they find the purpose is kind of like not irrelevant, but it's not the point, I guess. Like I have like two avenues I could take them down. If I'm making sense there. So like the idea of like they think they have a reason for being where they are, but it was a complete accident.
Okay, so the core concept that you want to explore with this character is the idea of, well, finding purpose. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah. And whether or
self-identity,
not finding an actual
self-discovery
purpose is, yeah, like an idea of like, is finding a purpose actually important rather than just doing what you think you need to do, or if that's like two different, whether or not that's two different things.
Okay. So they were a robot, which means that somebody made them, right?
Yeah.
We're gonna have to go out. We're gonna have to go a bit outside in on this, just because we already have a place where we're going to end up. So, Who built Raleigh?
I never actually thought of who specifically built Raleigh. I would assume the same thing that made things like Modrons. And if I'm correct, isn't that Mechanus himself? Mechanus the dude, not Mechanus the plane.
Take yourself out of D&D entirely. You are a robot. I'm not looking for an actual mechanical answer as to who built your exact character. I am saying who built them as a concept. Were they built by a kindly force, or were they built for war? Were they built by a tinker in a lab? Take yourself out of D&D entirely. We'll put ourselves back in there at the end. We want to make the character, and then we can put them back into D&D whenever we need to. But at the end of this, we will have a character that you can put into any system in any world, because you will have a character with a personality.
I guess they were made with the goal of like protecting a specific place.
Okay, they were crafted as a guardian.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And is what they were set there to protect a thing that still exists?
Yeah, it's still a thing that exists.
Okay. Then what's your call to action? What would make them leave it?
Well, the idea is that they didn't want to. They were kind of like accidentally forced out of the place while they were like shut down. So they have no idea why they're gone.
Okay. And that's letting outside influences carry them. That's not letting them that's not building their plot. That's letting them be adrift from outside forces, right?
Yeah.
So, I say we scrap that concept. Toss it out the window.
All right.
And say, what was their impetus? What drove them to leave their post? If they were made as a guardian, was it curiosity? Was it a gentle, naive curiosity? Or was it a necessity? Were they driven away? Was it by conflict, or was it by fear, or was it by neither? Were they enticed away by somebody who they loved? What pulled them away from being a guardian? The question is, what sparked the hero's journey?
I would say curiosity, since like trying to find the information they're looking for.
Okay.
Like, what is the purpose when they're not protecting anything anymore? And okay, I just realized that is, I don't know if that goes against the things we've already said.
You are so desperate to backfill right now.
I don't. I'm sorry. I've never actually like talked while I was making a thing. It's always been, hey, here's the thing. This is the result I am presenting. So
right.
I have no idea how to actually answer.
Well, that's why we're here. I mean, you don't worry about this. Like, there's not necessarily wrong answers. There's not really any problems at all with going through the process. And I don't know everything. I don't know exactly where we're going to end up or what your character is. My goal is to get you to be thinking about an individual as a personality rather than as a result. So,
all right,
starting with, throw the Modrons out the window, throw the D&D out the window. It shouldn't matter at this point in character creation if you are a robot, a golem, or an android. At this point, what's important, what the keystone that we're running off of is that you were created for a specific purpose. You were created, and a will was forced upon you. Correct?
Yeah.
But do you have free will?
I hadn't thought about like free will as a concept with this character, because
that's what we're doing now. So right now, just like snapped aside. Don't. we're going off of vibes and feelings right now. Snap aside. Does your character have a definable free will? Do they have if we've established that if they can leave out of curiosity, then it sounds like they do. But I need to hear it from you. I need to hear your thoughts on this. Do they have their own something that can be defined as free will?
I think they do, but don't realize it.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't know if I'm making sense. I'm thinking like they just kind of mindlessly protect the thing, and then they like realize, hey, there's more information. This is a nice thing. I would like this thing.
They would like this thing. Now, there you have struck on, whether intentional or not, you have struck on something very interesting. If they can like things, then they have their own, then they have free will, right? They have this idea of understanding pleasure, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's roll with that for a few seconds. What brings them pleasure? What brings them happiness? Is it I'm just going to spitball. Feel free to ignore everything I say. Is exploration and learning things something that brings them happiness? Is happiness? Do they get happiness out of servitude? Is service what makes them happy? Is their happiness stemming from a curiosity of this new? How old are they? How long have they been a guardian for? Is their happiness springing from the idea of finding out that there's a world out there that they can explore, or maybe they're something that was stolen and they're driven by this need to get it back? They don't. Their happiness is dependent on somebody else. Maybe just at the start of the game, their happiness is dependent on this algorithmic idea of I can only be happy when I get back what's needed. All of these have all these have respective needs, right? If they want to protect and just get the object back, maybe what their need is going to be is something like they need to see the greater world, or they need to understand the world beyond where they were created. Maybe their need is to see that they do have free will and that they can choose that they are not a puppet. Or maybe their need is that to find their master and question their own existence. Maybe their need is to find the person that created them as an individual and pressure them. And what their want is to get back an object, or their want is to explore, or their want is maybe their want is their curiosity, and their need is to I don't want to say submit necessarily, but maybe their want is to explore, and their need is to guard, is to go by their programming. There's a lot of options here, and I'm just trying to spark, I'm just trying to fire neurons right now.
So I had this idea they just like inherently think everything their creator is like what they're supposed to do, everything they're told to do.
Okay.
And I'm thinking like, so them wanting to gain more information requires them to leave what they're guarding. If I'm taking this idea.
Okay. Okay.
Requiring them to leave their area, and it kind of puts in conflict of like they want to both do what they're supposed to do, but they want to gain more information.
So we're running this idea of they want to learn because they have been crafted for a certain area and they are intelligent, and I like this idea of running off of curiosity. I think that's a very good thing to riff off of. I think that's a very good thing to work off of. Okay. Then, so they were created as a guardian.
Mm-hmm.
How well, and they love their creator, or at least they think that they love their creator, perhaps. Right?
Yeah.
how well do they know their creator?
I think they kind of they just kind of see them as this like omnipresent force. They don't really know much about them other than like what they're supposed to know.
Well, you get to decide what they're supposed to know, right? Like, you're the one creating the character.
Well, when I say supposed to know, I guess like what the creator wants them to know of themselves.
Yeah, but you get to decide that too.
Yeah,
The question is are they benevolent? Or
I don't actually know what that word means.
do they wish do they wish goodwill upon others?
I think the creator in particular doesn't really care. They just want to keep their stuff running.
Okay.
They
So
don't
they
really
were
care much about outside forces.
Okay, so then we have an interesting idea here of asymmetric relationship.
All right. Yeah.
In that you love the creator, but the creator does not love you.
Yeah.
Maybe learning that could be your impetus for leaving. That could be an interesting thing that sparked you to leave, is the realization that the person who created you doesn't actually care about you. And even though you loved them, you could play this like a bad breakup, and that actually could be a very powerful character. Say that they effectively had a bad breakup. In a sense, emotionally they still love the creator, but they don't feel that they can be with them right now because the creator doesn't love them. That's just an idea. I'm just tossing ideas at the wall. If the creator is an uncaring force of nature and not an individual, something in the obviously you are powerful enough to leave, right? Because otherwise you don't have a character, right? It's one of those things where you go into a bar, the DM says someone comes in asking for help, the players say we don't want to help him, and then the DM says okay, campaign's over. That was the right. So you have to leave. You have to leave your job as a guardian. The question is why. We have a couple of ideas now. One idea is curiosity, because they want to see the world, because they've never seen the world outside of their guardian cell, and they've realized that they have the ability and desire to. Another idea is that for something in their charge is forcing them to leave, be it an external force like adventurers coming in and stealing an object and they have to go find it, or maybe the adventurers destroyed the object and they need to go find the master for new orders, or maybe they just can't stand working for a creator that does not love them the way that they feel for them. There's a lot of good options here that we can work with, and I think right now might want to pin one down. Right now we want to pin what starts the hero's journey. Why did you leave? We have a lot of good options here, and none of them are bad. The core question here is, though, what starts Raleigh's journey?
Something you had spitballed about, like adventurers taking a thing, kind of it's kind of similar to one of the ideas I had initially of Raleigh. Okay, so Raleigh idea was like Raleigh is supposed to be a defender, but for some reason doesn't act when somebody comes in. And it's like maybe a group or something. I didn't really pin that part down. But
Again, we're starting from scratch.
Yeah.
Don't worry about what you've written so far. I'm not asking you questions about the character you've written. We're going to start over, and then we're going to work into that part later on.
Yeah, I was just trying to.
Oh, sorry.
Like as a comparison, like idea was he failed to act when this group came in and did something. So they were turned off, and that was the initial idea. I like these newer ideas like a lot better. They seem a little more coherent than the little robot man was turned off and then got tossed in the garbage.
Which of these speaks to you? Which of these feels like a character that you would want to play the role of for 6 months or however long the character campaign is going to last?
I'm not entirely sure.
And take your time. But talk through your thought process though. Take your time, but take your time with your mouth hanging open. You know what I'm saying?
So, okay,
So,
hold on.
options that we thought of here. Leaving for curiosities to learn. Leaving because some object was stolen. Leaving because object is destroyed. Even if it maybe just wore out. Maybe it was a clock and the clock's not ticking anymore, and they need to find their master to see if they need new orders. Their orders maybe that new orders because the current ones either don't apply or don't make sense. Cannot respect their creator. Cannot love somebody who does not love them.
Here's an idea. Playing on multiple of these ideas with the curiosity and the creator not like loving them back the way they do.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they like ask questions that the creator doesn't want to answer or doesn't want answered.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't want them asking any more questions, and they get upset and Raleigh wants to leave.
Ooh, I like that because that leaves. I like that actually. Yeah. That one speaks to me personally as somebody who's lived with ADD their whole life. This idea of asking questions and then being punished for asking questions that they thought were reasonable questions that they needed to know.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I still deal with family members getting mad at me for asking basic things because I am neurodivergent.
Mm-hmm. Same.
So I ask a lot of questions, or I don't understand very simple stuff that's very simple to other people.
Stuff that you're expected to know, right?
Yeah. Like,
and then you ask what. I always use the shield of how was I supposed to know that, right? That was something that I used as a shield growing up. Was when if I didn't know something, I would look at the person and say, "How was I supposed to know that?" Because you're expected to know so many things in this world, and people who are neurodivergent don't get that instinctively and need to ask questions. So I personally, if I was building it, I would probably go with the bad breakup one. Say they couldn't respect a creator who couldn't who didn't love them who didn't love them the same way that they loved a creator who could not love the creation in the same way that the creation loved the creator, because that I think speaks to a good relationship issue, like that speaks to anybody who's had a bad breakup in that situation, and I have. But I think for what you're saying here, asking questions of the creator, this is your character and your path, and I like that. So they ask questions of the creator, and
I got something I just thought about that's unintentionally relevant to this idea. I'm gonna
lay it out.
Feel comfortable saying it out loud.
What was that?
I'm typing very quick because
I mean,
actually,
we're making content.
Wait till some other time.
Okay.
Yeah, there's this thing I thought it would be like, yes, bring this up because it seems relevant, but then I'm like, yeah, no, I don't type fast enough for that to be a thing, and I can't type and talk at the same time.
No worries.
Yeah, I'll some other time.
Yeah, sure. Again, this is just building a framework, right? We're not, this is not going to be anything set in stone. This is creating a framework, an idea to give your character a motivation and a personality. That's what it boils down to, a personality. So they ask questions of their creator, and their creator, what? Set them free, turn them loose, tried to have them destroyed and failed?
I think at first maybe try to dissuade them from asking questions, and it's like a just take what I give you kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Which clearly failed otherwise.
Yeah, which fails. and they ask multiple times and are not answered, and maybe they go to others that the creators created to ask the same questions to see if they know,
Ooh.
and none of them do, and also themselves tell them not to ask.
And they, oh, that works really well, because then you can say that they asked the same questions of other people, and their creator hated them for asking those questions of anyone other than them, even though they
Yeah,
refused to answer it
like
themselves.
I'm thinking maybe they like
Ooh, I like that.
creator suspects them of like intentional or not, but like attempting, like I guess for lack of a better word, something like a mutiny. It's like yes, they maybe they like just suspect Raleigh of thinking of wanting to like throw them out because they won't, or because they're like questioning them,
The creator sees
but they're not
that them as
questioning
dangerous.
that. Yeah, they see Raleigh as dangerous when all Raleigh wants to know is just what the answer to those questions are.
But in this case, they are a creation, so they're seen as dangerous or perhaps broken.
Yeah, yeah, I like the broken idea. Like they seem broken because they're not completely obedient to the intention of the creator.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to write that word for word. The creator sees them as broken because they do not see to the intentions of the creator. Yes?
Yeah.
Now that is the start of a character. All right, let's work with that. That's a foundation. That's a foundation. Now we have something to go off of, and I like that. That works. So, how do they see themselves?
That's a good question.
I thought so.
Well, yeah, that checks out. How they see themselves. I'm thinking. Hold on, I gotta dust the gears off.
Sure, take your time.
Maybe they don't really think of themselves as themselves, but instead like part of like the thing they're trying to protect. They're like, I am an aspect of this thing and not really my own.
Now
And play
that leads
that
into a
into
very
the
good need.
yeah, that like playing into the not realizing they have free will kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. So what their need is... could you repeat that again?
They're not really seeing themselves as their own. They are like part of the thing they're protecting. They don't like see themselves as a separate entity, but like an aspect of the creator's creations.
So they see themselves as only existing as an extension of their master.
Yeah.
And that... that's not a need, that's a conflict. So if that's the conflict, then let's figure out the wants and needs. What do they need? Self-realization? Self-actualization? Do they need... Or do they need to find a new group to fit into? Is their need actually to be a part of that, of a gear in a system that they just need to find a new system for? Or do they need to see themselves as their own creature? If they only exist as the extension of their master, maybe what they need... Again, this is a long term. This is something that probably isn't going to happen at the beginning, for most of the campaign. This is the end goal of how you want your character to improve and develop over time. What is their story arc? What is their character arc?
I think realizing they are their own entity and that they don't explicitly need the creator.
You still have elements of a bad breakup in here, and I'm here for it. I love it. No, I'm serious though. This idea of someone who was in a long-term relationship, who still thinks about their ex all the time and needs to realize to move past it. Yeah, they need to
Yeah,
move
I
on.
kind of like this like breakdown of the idea, like the abstraction, whatever it is, making it more understandable.
Hmm.
Is I'm saying all these things and it's not really fully clicking for myself, but you seem to just be able to grab it.
Well, I'm just grasping at concepts, right? You're saying words, and I'm just listening. I'm just actively listening. Is all I'm doing. I'm not doing anything special. Now, their want cannot be the same as the need, because otherwise you have a linear character who's not interesting, right? If the want is the same as the need, then you have a Mary Sue. You don't have a plot line. You're just a cog, which is what we're trying to avoid. So, what do they want that's wrong? Again, think of it like a Disney movie. Ariel wants to go to the surface world. What she needs is to be recognized. It's actually not that far off from this. I'm kind of seeing a little bit of Little Mermaid in this. Ariel wants to be she wants more. Like that's the whole literally the I want song is I want more. I want to see what the people see and I want to, live in their world. But what she needs is to find somebody who respects her for who she is. There's a little bit of that in here. What you want is not what you need, but it's what your character thinks they need.
I guess answers to the questions that the creator wouldn't answer. They feel like that's something that's like the thing they're missing.
But they were already cast out, right?
I guess like still
So
wanting the answers while they're cast out. They're like, well, if I understand this thing, I'll understand why I was kicked out, or why I wasn't allowed to know
I
what
think you
happened.
touched on something there.
Oh,
They want to understand why they were thrown away.
yeah,
That's not the same thing. That's not the same thing as saying, what is the questions that that you were
I guess,
asking? It's why was I thrown away? Why was I unwanted?
yeah, and then like, why was I not allowed to know?
Mm-hmm. And in the end, whatever the answer is probably immaterial, right? Like the answer to why you were unwanted or what the question answer to the question was you were asking doesn't matter at the end of the day. What matters is
Yeah,
that that's what you think is important, and when you stop asking that question and you realize that you don't feel the need to be tied to your master anymore, is when your character it reaches their narrative apotheosis. That is when the character is able to move on from and live their own life.
yeah, yeah.
And I think you have a great setup for a character that starts out maybe not in full depression, but starts out very meek, right? The next question is what kind of person has these wants and needs? And this is where I should be letting you handle it, but I'm going to toss a couple ideas out like before. What kind of person was thrown away and needs to learn to move on? I'm thinking high school drama stuff, and I'm loving it.
What do you mean by like high school drama stuff?
I'm thinking that this plotline works just as well for Sailor Moon as it does for D&D.
I've
Someone
never
was
seen Sailor Moon.
somebody was this works just as well for relationship drama or as it would for anything else, because you're creating a person who has wants and needs. So what kind of person was thrown away, and what sort of person needs to move on? Let's take a look at some of the other stuff we have here. Ask questions of the creator. They were dissuaded from answering the questions, and then the creator failed there. They asked the creator's peers. The creator hated the fact that they went behind their back, right?
Yeah,
And that was the final straw for the creator to throw them out. and decide that they are no longer useful, needed, wanted.
I guess like
Gotta figure
creator
out a
no
little bit of the
longer
creators.
sees them as
Sorry, go ahead.
the creator no longer seeing them as like necessary, and that they can just be replaced after that point.
Replaceable. Ooh. So
It's like, oh, I made this thing. Why don't I just make another one, but without this flaw?
So the want is to be, not just rather to be accepted, but rather. Yeah, actually, I like this. So if their want, based on that replaceable nature, if their want is to be accepted, and they want the rebound, like what they want is the rebound relationship, in a sense. They want somebody to accept them. What they need is to realize that they don't need another person. They need their own self. They need to recognize that they are worthy of love on their own without having to work towards somebody else, without having to be dependent on somebody else. I think dependency is actually a big part of this.
Yeah.
They want to be dependent on somebody, don't they?
I guess so, yeah.
But that's not what they need. They need to move on.
Kind of like that assurance that there is like a point to everything they've done, and like knowing like, yes, I served this purpose and I fulfilled this purpose. But like,
could you repeat the first couple words that again?
What do you mean? Like, yeah, I'm stumbling. Sorry. Like the assurance that, like, I've done lost myself. I'm sorry.
So they're looking for reassurance.
Yeah.
They're looking for comfort. Comfort, I think, is a good way of saying that.
Yeah.
They're looking for comfort, reassurance. They want to be dependent on somebody else. They want to be accepted. They want to understand why they were not allowed to be dependent to their master. They want to understand why they were not accepted by their master. They want to understand why they were not reassured by their master, why their master didn't comfort them, and now they're seeking that in other people's arms, right? Does that work?
Yeah, that works.
And their need is, well, to realize that they're their own entity, right? Like, that's what you said earlier?
Yeah, realizing that they are their own entity and they can be completely independent of any of the creator at all.
They need to realize that they can be free.
Yeah.
Pick a setting. Pick a non-D&D setting.
Non-D&D setting.
Yeah, anything. Just pick a genre.
I don't know why, but talking about the high school drama thing put fish hooks into my head. If you ever seen that show?
No.
Okay, so Fish Hooks was a show on Disney, where it was a group of 3 friends, and they went to high school, and they were all goldfish. Well, not specifically goldfish, but they were like pet fish kind of thing.
I mean more in the general sense. I mean like in the genre sense of, Oh, sure. This is a kids show?
Yeah, it was a kids show.
Okay. I mean, could you play this character in a kids show?
Yeah, potentially.
Absolutely. Character was tossed away by someone or something, and they need to realize that that they can be their own person. That's, I mean, that sounds very appropriate for for a Disney kids show.
Maybe going on the Disney thing, they're like feeling a little bit of Toy Story. Like maybe it's like discarded toy.
Actually, Toy Story is a really good parallel here because you even have the creature master thing. Woody's entire motivation in Toy Story is that he wants to be played with more. His want is that he wants to be the number one toy again, and his need is to recognize friendship and teamwork. I think that's actually a really good analogy. But my point for saying that was, you've created a personality here. You've created a character, and now you can put this character in just about any setting you want to. And if we put it in D&D, yeah, there's a master, there's the creator, that they are a literal construct in the situation. They're a tiny robot with a big sword. Sure. But when you're making a character, you need to free them from the setting. Well, you don't need to, but it can help to free them from the setting first. Do you understand why?
Yeah, because you're not like trying to force the concepts that you're working with into
Right.
the setting.
You're not backfilling into the setting. You're creating a character and then putting them in the setting.
Yeah.
I think that you have a pretty interesting character here.
Thank you.
You have a backstory, you have wants, you have needs, you have right out of the gate, you're going to latch on to the first person that you see because you were unwanted, and you have this want to be loved. You have this want to be to. I mean, honestly, I would, if I were you, I'd play it almost sycophantically. You know, let's like latch on to somebody and don't let go to the point of being annoying to them. But eventually, slowly over time, learning to become yourself and learning who you can be on your own. I think that you have a very interesting character dynamic there that will work well. How do you feel about it? This is your character. I've only asked probing questions and given thoughts.
I like this a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I just saw somebody new. Is that like an actual person, or is that like a bot?
What was that?
I saw somebody in your chat with like I don't know. It just kind of caught my attention.
Don't worry about it. You know what, chat? What do you guys think about this? Chat, what do you think about the process and the character? If I did something wrong, if I was too intrusive on this, let me know as well.
I think you were I guess intrusive enough in a way to phrase it, because I was like constantly like uncomfortable. It's like, how do I don't know how to answer this question. This is going against my initial idea, but like nothing's perfect on the first draft, and I'm still working on understanding that idea.
And even this is still just a framework, right? Even this can still be adapted and changed. But the important thing, in my opinion, is that you have the wants and the needs. You have the present, past, present, and future. You have the present, which is the wants and needs. You have the past because, well, we built the past with the into it, right? Because you had a very strict idea of where you wanted the character to end up. So we sort of took the not exactly the mechanics first, but the outside-in approach, where what other people think about our character, about your character, is core to how the character sees themselves. You know, that's something that I think worked well in this situation. And then, what's that leave? Come on.
Words.
Come on, you can do this.
That leaves like... I'm sorry.
We did past and present.
At least the future left. I forgot.
Hey!
I forgot the word future. I was like...
All
I
good.
actually like legitimately forgot. Like, no joke, I was about to Google what comes after present.
I get it. I respect it. I do. So talk to me about development. So obviously you don't know what the GM is going to give you, right? You don't know what the GM is going to give you for plot. You only have control over your own character, right?
Yeah.
Which means it's your responsibility to find ways to slowly over time get more in tune with your needs and start to recognize the shortcomings of your wants. And to be honest, Ursula's probably not going to help you in this one. So, spitballing ideas here of what character development looks like for this character.
Well, for one, character development being learning that, like, getting to the point that they realize they don't need the creator, as like they thought they did, at least. And then, I guess, maybe throwing in the additional thing of knowing that some questions can't or won't be answered,
Mm-hmm.
and understanding that's okay. But it is perfectly fine to wonder things and like learn more than what like people tell you can or can't know.
Yeah, and the idea here, of course, as you know, is what's the path from wants to needs, and I think that you answered it very nicely. Is it's okay to wonder and learn. That can be part of the path of development to how they can get to the point of being free, of how they can learn to move on. Is learning that the restrictions that they had were somewhere between hurting them or unnecessary or somewhere along those lines.
I'm sorry? Can you ask the question again? I didn't catch the first part.
So I was mostly musing at that point, actually.
Oh,
But yeah, it's the path from wants to needs. The path your character will need to slowly and over time. And again, you can't control the GM, but the GM, if you have some of these ideas, the GM will probably give you opportunities that will help you along the way. The future part is something that in tabletop games you have less control over, right? If this was a video game, you could write the plot and do that. If you were writing a short story here, well, yeah, you write the short story so that the wants become needs. You make the Disney musical. In a D&D setting, you are on your own on that because somebody else is managing the story, which means that you will need to find places where your wants are insufficient and places where your needs feel right. And as you're playing, you'll need to think about when those moments are and, well, how you can grasp onto them and how those can define your character. Because something like that will show up. And I think that your answer here, saying that it's okay to wonder and learn, maybe the first couple times you're wondering and saying, and you're on the road and you stop and look at a flower or something like that, your party will chastise you and you will feel incredibly guilty about that. Maybe later on, the fact that you have this wondering nature says, no, wait, I know this, that I know how to make sulfuric acid. I hyperfixated on that and learned about that a while ago. Maybe it's at some point learning and wondering and having that curiosity helps, right? And eventually that leads to the idea that, wait, I did that on my own. Wait, I helped the party and I didn't need them to give me commands, if you will. I didn't need the comfort, the reassurance from them. I did that. You'll have to find those spots on your own as you play, because again, you're not writing the script on this the way you would be for a game. But you also can't just jump to the needs, because you can't just jump there on your own for free, because then you'll lose that character development.
Yeah. I'm also thinking of a situation where they have to choose between gaining more information or doing something that's more important. Like maybe they have the chance to like observe something that doesn't happen often, but there's a thing that needs to get done like yesterday type now. And they either miss the opportunity to see this thing or they miss out on doing the thing they're supposed to do, which is, they already had the thing of they want to complete their initial purpose, and maybe they don't like not being able to finish tasks they're given.
Maybe at one point
getting distracted. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say maybe at one point curiosity overwhelms commands.
Yeah.
And that's good. I'm just working off of what you said. Yeah. Okay. I think you got a character, buddy. I think you got a character, buddy.
This is probably the most. This is like the most developed character I've had, and I've written entire comics before. I feel kind of bad.
Don't feel bad. I mean, now you have this process, you'll be able to do it again. You can recreate this. And the video will be
Yeah.
here if you want to rewatch it sometime.
Yeah.
Now, guess what it's time for?
I just saw you type on your stream, and I know it says Polish, but I saw Polish and was wondering what the hell we're about to do.
No, not quite. So, now you have a character. Now you have a backstory. Now you have a present. Now you have an idea of what future looks like. So, let's figure out who this is. Let's figure out some of the little minutia that will help you. It's not time to learn Polish. There you go. That will help you. You know what? Let's start with that. What languages does your character know?
Common. I didn't actually, when I made the actual player race, I didn't think to put languages, but I would assume because robot kobold, it would be like the basic common and draconic.
Yeah, but again, we're tossing all the setting stuff out, right?
Yeah, setting stuff out. I was about to get to, like, I guess, like, whatever the common language is, it's, like, important.
Yeah.
And then maybe whatever language they thought sounded the weirdest because it was interesting.
Oh, no, there's... Okay. Which leads to another question that we should have answered before. How long have you been away from your master?
Think... I'm not sure how to answer that outside of, like, referencing the mechanics of D&D, because it's like, oh, at this level, they would be gone for this long.
Yeah, but that's not...
But, like, I'm like, trying to, like... I know the point is to make them, like, independent of the game, and I'm trying to think of how to phrase what I'm thinking of.
Was it very... I mean, obviously it's going to be fairly recent emotionally, right? Otherwise, because that's where your character is starting. You're starting at this point of looking for the rebound, if you will. But the question is how long ago? Was it very recent, or did they? Let me tell you where I'm going with. Let me tell you what I'm thinking with on this, and you can tell me how you want to process this or throw it out entirely. Did they learn a language at their master's behest, or did they learn a language because they were curious and wanted to learn it?
I think they learned another language because they were curious and wanted to know.
Okay.
And maybe that started a little bit of friction because they're spending time not doing the thing they're meant to do.
Oh, they started learning another language while they were still with their master.
Yeah.
I like it. And that's part of what has created a bit of that tension between them. Now, what language the other thing is completely immaterial, right?
Yeah.
What the other language is, completely immaterial. But you see why I'm asking it.
Yeah. I'm thinking before they leave, they just know, like, their main language and then the second language partially. And then while they're out, just as they're going about their, like, whatever they're doing, they're, like, learning more on the other language is kind of that, like, curiosity thing. And then part of, like, well, I've already started this task.
Do they eat?
And as for, like, I'm sorry?
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna, like, as for, like, now that I'm realizing, like, part of the problem with how I was trying to answer, like, how long ago was them separating from the creator, I was trying to put a specific number.
Yep.
And, because I am very specific when I'm, most of the time.
And
so I was, like, sitting there struggling, like, well, how long would be reasonable? And then just recently. It was recent.
Yeah. That's really what it is looking for is, it's the actual time doesn't matter if it's a day or 100 years. The question is emotionally how long has it been? And recently is I think where the character should start. I think that's a good place to handle that. So, can your character eat?
No.
Do they want?
I don't think eating, like, if we're going a technical route, which I don't think we're trying to, but, like, I don't think they actually, like, eat food, but they do consume fuel. And I'm not sure if that's important.
Again, we're throwing
But
out all the mechanics. The question is, can they eat? And, or is food a meaningless concept to them?
I think it's meaningless, but they would see other people doing it and wonder what it's about.
Okay. I like that. And asking somebody else to describe a flavor to you would be like trying to describe a color to a blind man.
Yeah.
That could be a really fun character moment.
Yeah, like, oh, what does salt taste like? Well, it tastes like salt, but what is salt?
Yeah, that could be a really good moment of trying to learn about something that you genuinely can't comprehend. I like that. How do you value comfort?
I don't think beforehand they ever considered comfort.
Mm-hmm.
They just knew the conditions they were in.
Mm-hmm.
But afterwards, maybe after the separation, they get more and more like they like have the idea of like, oh, this is comfort. This is nice.
So they like comfort but didn't have it. Do they?
It's a
Some
new
people who.
concept to them.
Mm-hmm. Now, here's a thought I have. Feel free to throw this out. But
All right.
some people in that situation, some people who are denied comfort for much of their lives, who then have access to it, have a guilt associated with accepting it.
Yeah, I figured that's where this was going. I actually do get that IRL at some points. I think like they feel really guilty at first, but the longer they do it, it kind of wanes. But even in perpetuity, it's like, eh, do I actually deserve this?
Mm-hmm. I'm writing that down. Do I deserve this? Because that right there is a very, very good character line. Do I deserve this? Is almost a driving force on this character, right? Is the question of you've been controlled by somebody who's effectively gaslit you your whole life. It's wait, is it okay to sleep in a bed? I was never allowed to. My master must have had a reason for not letting me, right? Yeah, that little bit tragic, and I like it. All right, so I have another question for you.
All right.
Did you realize that I stopped referring to this as the character and started referring to it as you?
I did not notice that. Was that intentional, or did you catch?
Oh,
yourself doing that?
that was 100% intentional.
Very well done.
Thank you.
Oh, I just got told I was being too loud.
What?
I just got told I was being too loud. Oops.
Oh, well.
Anyway.
But no, that actually was intentional. That was that.
That genuinely caught me off guard.
Right? Because you were starting to put yourself in the character's shoes, and I could feel that you were putting yourself in the character's shoes. So I started pivoting and saying you, and you were answering as I, and well, like, yeah. So I wanted to push you in that direction because, well, that's method acting. That is how acting is done, right? It's not like some magical, mysterious concept. That's how acting is when you start answering the questions with I as opposed to they. All right. And ask and answer a question on your own. Like, ask yourself a question that you don't know the answer to, and then just feel out the character and say, how would they react to this? What is their answer? What is my answer?
What do playing on a question that was asked earlier, like, what do they define as comfort?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And Not really sure how to answer that now that I've asked it. But yeah,
Good. That means it's a good question.
I didn't think about the question before I asked it. It was just popped into my head. Maybe not doing anything. Maybe they're like, the idea of comfort is just resting because they've always been doing something.
So their definition of comfort is rest and peace.
Yeah.
Ooh, now there's a fun thought. Going with the character's needs, they might not realize that. What if the character thinks that comfort is service? But what they need is comfort as rest, as a secondary to the other one. But that might be another way of developing, of looking at it.
Yeah. There's like comfort, like they're doing something, they don't feel guilty because they're pursuing a task like they're supposed to be doing, or at least they think they're supposed to be doing. Then there's like the comfort of not doing anything and just enjoying time. But
Or
that
just
time
being
isn't
allowed
being
to enjoy
spent
time.
yeah. That time not being spent pursuing a task is like maybe they see it as wasting time for a while.
I like it. I like where you're going with that. How do they feel about splendor?
What do you mean by splendor?
The character sees a beautiful mountain range or a tree in full bloom. Anyway, like a cherry tree in full bloom. How does the character feel about seeing something beautiful? How does the character feel about seeing beauty? Is it utilitarian? Is it appreciative? Is it awe?
I think it's kind of an awe. It's like, yes, new information I did not have before, and this information stands out a lot.
So splendor is also an opportunity to unlearn.
Yeah, splendor is an opportunity to learn. When you initially said splendor, like I didn't think about like beauty and stuff. I thought of like, yes, lots of very pretty things for the sake of having pretty things, because that's like, I don't know why I had that connotation. Is connotation the word for it?
Yeah, I mean,
just
you're a
that
kobold.
thought
I
when
get
you
it.
first said it. Oh.
Trust me, I get it.
I really out here making us not look like the stereotype, ain't I? What's next? I'm start eating rocks.
Rocks.
They're pretty great. I have a canvas.
I mean, you have to have a couple of rocks in your craw, otherwise you can't, break down other foods.
Yeah. And then rocks also are just pretty tasty. No one can say they haven't eaten rocks because all of you have eaten salt.
Wait, can humans eat salt?
I don't know.
No. Humans don't eat rocks. No, humans don't eat salt. That's crazy. That makes sense.
And then the tangent of like what splendor means, I think like just the excess of having a bunch of things. Maybe they see like having things as a purely utility standpoint, or like maybe the first time they see like a fancy chandelier or something, they're like, oh wait, why is this here? And they ask, and people are kind of dismissive. It's like, because it's nice. Well, what? Why is it nice?
I have another question for you.
All right.
Does your character click the bell? I mean, I have to assume that they like and subscribe, but do they actually click the little bell next to the subscribe button?
I assume they would. It would make a ding noise, which is very good information.
It does, it does. I think that's a good advice for everybody. I think we can all learn something from that.
I know I clicked. That's how I got the notification for this stream. I also set a timer for it.
Nice. I lost a viewer for that shill. Okay, I see how it is.
That's fair.
Honestly, I get it. It's fair. All right.
Now the second question: which bell did they ring first, the gargoyles or the or Quaylag's bell?
I was ringing the gargoyle bell first.
A gargoyle bell is my go-to because Blighttown.
Oh yeah, Blighttown's great. You want to save Blighttown so you can savor it. You know.
I want to save Blighttown until I get the fucking key so I can go through backwards.
That's fun too. Chat, give out a polished question. Give out a question. A simple question about someone living their day-to-day life. Well, let's take one or two from chat if chat feels like being active today. Once in a while, chat doesn't feel like being active, and I get it. It can be relaxing.
Yeah.
There's no commitment, of course.
My chat's pretty dead most of the time, regardless of how many people I have.
Usually when I go do streams like this, they end up being like lectures. You know, they end up being... There's a question. Toilet paper out, toilet paper in. So when you have a question like that doesn't directly apply because your character does, you know, not create a lot of waste, you have to extrapolate it into what that comes from. So the question there is, how much do they care about order? How much do they care about, that kind of order?
I think order and routine is very important to them. They have to do things the same way every time. Because it's like, yes, this is part of the task. This is how the task is accomplished.
It has to be right. Yeah?
Yeah. If it works this way, then it will work this way every time. And
that's how it's supposed to be.
Maybe that goes into some kind of conflict where they're used to thing working a specific way. But then, meeting people who don't operate the same way every time, like not robotic. It's like,
Sorry, there's a really good question though. Do you dream? First of all, do you have the capability of dream? That is to say, if you go shutdown mode, do you have some sort of equivalency of dreaming? So I didn't want to end your rail on there. I thought I'm like, ooh, that's a perfect question.
I think that could be another thing they ask about in like, how do you explain what a dream is to somebody who has no concept of sleep?
I don't know. That might be something that set you apart. Maybe you do dream, and that's why you function differently than the other ones.
Yeah, that is a good one.
That's actually a really interesting direction. That's also fitting with the allegory of neurodivergency. Is that you dream, which makes you different from all the other constructs. That actually I like that a lot. Obviously, you don't have to do that. I saw that question. No. I'm like, ooh, that's a really good question.
It is a good question. Yeah. I think whether they do or don't dream, maybe like understanding the concept of what a dream is could be like a question they're chasing the answer to. Like, what is this thing I see occasionally and don't remember most of the time, despite the fact that, the robot, they're supposed to remember everything. Where does it come from? Is he capable of spontaneity? Is that the word for it? Being spontaneous?
Yeah, being spontaneous, spontaneity. Yeah.
That's a whole chain of things I didn't think about.
Well, that's the goal, right? The goal is to make you think about things that you wouldn't be thinking about. That's why you use these prompts. That's why you take some of these concepts and work and roll with them is to force yourself to answer questions that you weren't prepared to answer, and figure out what that means to the character that you're creating. If you knew the answers, it wouldn't be interesting.
No, I don't. It might, but that's a whole different other context.
Mm-hmm.
The point here is like creating the thing and not talking about the thing that's already created.
Right. It's about creating a new thing and not just creating a concept. Like, you can work with tropes. You can work with tropes. But this is the difference between a character that is a trope and a character that utilizes the tropes, right? If a character is a trope, that usually means that they're not deep. They don't have depth. We're creating depth here. And I think that we have created a lot of depth. I think that you have a very interesting character, and yeah. I think at the beginning you didn't, because you were talking about things that happened to them as opposed to what they did, right? Your opening discussion was describing your character as tiny thing, big sword.
Yeah.
And they can still be tiny thing, big sword. That can still be apply. But now, with everything that we've done, what is your initial pitch for the character? Is it still big thing, tiny thing, big sword? How would you describe this character now?
The tiny thing, big sword kind of feels irrelevant now.
Right? That's what that. See, I said at the beginning, okay, throw away all the D&D stuff, and you clung to it. You're like, but no, that's what I have. That's what the character is. And now you realize, no, that's not actually important to who the character is as a person, as a character, as a creature.
Yeah, I realized I don't know if this is gonna make sense, but it was kind of like conflating Cloud to guy with big sword rather than, hey, this is Cloud.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a
I say as
deeply.
if I'd ever played Final Fantasy.
What was that?
That I say as if I'd ever played Final Fantasy VII.
Yo, it's good.
I'm sure
like,
it is. Everyone tells me.
Go watch my playthrough of Final Fantasy VI. It's really good, though. That's my recommendation to you.
All right.
Final Fantasy VI has a lot of very deep characters and outstanding character moments, and none of the characters in there exist just as a trope. They all have depth to them, and yeah, like it's a Cloud, big guy with sword, as opposed to Cloud, a deeply troubled and confused person who has been taken advantage of their whole life. A conflicted individual who doesn't quite understand the nature of their own existence and how they relate to the world around them. A person who cares about their friends but doesn't know how to if they can protect them in a crisis. Cloud is a deep character, but yeah, also he happens to have a big sword. But if you've actually played and read and understood the game, you understand the depth that's there. Yeah. But when you're making a character, it's finding the depth, it's creating the depth, and now, exactly like you say, tiny thing, big sword seems superficial. That seems like just a surface level reading that just happens to be what they look like. Now you have a person. You have a character.
That just kind of fell like a bunch of dominoes.
Did it all click there? Did I make things click?
Yeah, it clicks.
Good. Honestly, I'm proud of that. I am.
It's like getting to the end of a Vsauce video. Yeah, okay. That didn't feel connected, but it is.
Oh, snap. If you like Vsauce, you should check out Let Me Know. It's another good...
Oh, I fucking love Lemino.
Yeah. They upload like once a year, but when they do, it's gold.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I've watched the video about the plane. I can't remember the number now, but I've watched it like 6 times.
You have already read the Chive finale story, but I haven't. I don't think I'm gonna finish it. So I think I want to read it out on stream and discuss it. If you'd be okay with that.
Right.
I think we've. Is there any more that you want to do on your character? I feel like we've sort of. I don't know about if solved is the right word, but I feel like we've figured out who your character is.
Yeah. Do you mind like sending me the stuff you wrote?
Already did.
Oh. I saw it highlight right after I asked, and then suddenly I hear the ding noise. Did they already?
No, yeah.
Um,
And yes,
yeah,
this is how you should make all characters. If you're making a character that is going to be on screen for more than, let's say, 10 minutes, if you're making a character that has a narrative purpose, this is what you should do. This took us, what? An hour? About an hour. Almost exactly an hour.
wow.
That's only an hour, right?
That feels way like so much more happened than just.
Yeah?
Wow.
And admittedly, it was sped up because I'm experienced in this. It's sped up because I've done this several times and I have, I've got the degree in fine arts to be able to help make sure the directions are going. If you do this on your own, it'll probably take a lot longer.
Yeah.
That's okay. That's fine. Because as you do it, you will continue to get better at it and you will continue to make better characters. So, yeah, do these things. So I tried to incorporate every party member in this little short skit. And I gave a little bit of extra to Remmel because the dynamic between Remmel and Chive was so good. It really was. Like, I don't...
Yeah, I think that's probably like that dynamic, and then Piffle alone are like the two big things for like I remember from like the game, and that's saying something because I don't even remember half of my own interactions other than "Hi, would you like a frog?"
Yeah, but just imagine if you spend a couple hours rewriting Pithro, like, like imagine how much of a character you could have out of it then, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I started out with opening up with Remmel, Chive, we need to go back to the church. They're the bishop's son. He wouldn't be in such an unclean, lowly. By the gods above there, he is. This gives I'm going to talk through this whole thing. I'm not actually going to read it out like a dramatic. I'm actually going to talk through my story writing. This is short story writing, right?
Yeah.
My idea here is setting the stage. This sets the stage of they're in a bar. They're in something that Remmel considers unclean and lowly, and it tells you that they're looking for a bishop's son, right? This tells you a lot of information. Information that I realize I mess up later on, but whatever. It's supposed to be a merchant's son. Anyways, doesn't matter. This is how I want to start out, so I could do this. This is an establishing shot, right? And immediately it proves Chive to be right. Chive had a list of condescending water. Chive had a list of always. I sometimes hydrate. Chive had a list of condescending remarks and patronizing one-liners to say in this sort of situation. He kept a notepad by his bed just in case he thought of more. But in this moment, a simple knowing smile felt like the most savage of all of them. This characterization on Chive, right? It's this moment of, like, yeah, I got this. I did it. Because the Chive, if you know, one thing that was recurring throughout the game is that Chive is a worse investigator than Remmel. And he knows it. Remmel is the better investigator of the two, and it's not even a close margin. Remmel's competent, skilled, and an expert. And I think that Chive existing alongside Remmel really helped elevate Remmel's character too. Remmel, I feel like Remmel went from a fairly generic investigator, like, yeah, I'm an investigator, hero, adventure, that's pretty generic. I think that Chive existing helped Willison make Remmel, helped realize Remmel's character, right?
Yeah.
Especially the way he
started. Now I feel kind of bad for putting the rabbit ears on Sherlock and not Watson after that comparison. when I made that made the meme.
No worries. And then, as the rest of the group walked over to confront the merchant's son, Chive instead walked to the bar. The grand chase had taken them across the entire duchy. Surely they wouldn't begrudge him a victory drink or two. 4 drinks later, I did that just for the segue. I wrote this line just for the segue. No one would begrudge him a drink or two. They had was victory. They just did it. 4 drinks later, like that's entirely why I wrote this entire paragraph was just to set up that he's been drinking and to say that he can't control himself because he can't. He's an alcoholic. That's kind of the core point of it. One of the core things of the character. Oh, they'll be back in just a moment. We will. Rook will be back in just a moment, it seems. I'll get 2 drinks. Immediately downs 8. Yeah, that's very much their character, because they don't have anything to live for. That's really what Chive's character is. Like I said, I made the characters to make a character that didn't have wants. They didn't have any wants because they had been beaten down too many times in the past. So, yeah, that was part of the core difficulty in making the character was how do you make a character with wants and needs who's been beaten down enough that they don't have wants anymore. And that was the my goal, if you will, for creating them.
All right, my PC
Welcome.
just locked up for a bit,
No worries. Welcome back.
so I kind of missed like the last like minute and a half or whatever you were saying.
No, it was just I filled time with back with reminding people what Chive exists as. It's a character without wants. It's a character who, when I made the character, they had been beaten down so much that they didn't have any wants because of how many times they've been beaten down and how many losses they've had. That was really what I was going for in them. 4 drinks later, Cantabarres seemed to apparate next to him. You may want to listen in on this, I think. Chive looked around groggily, forgetting himself for a few moments, his paw clutching onto the ceramic tankard like a lifeline. We're deciding how to get to Cavhaven. I liked this. I wrote this out mostly to establish the ceramic tankard, but also this is the way that they're getting the party back getting Chive back in to catch up with the party. Yeah, Chive had definitely missed something. They were just about to claim the reward, enough to comfortably retire off of. With a mumbled, what? Yeah, okay. He got out of his chair and walked towards the mark where the rest of his team hovered. Ah, there you are. Good. This lad just told us about a rift of sorts that needs to be handled. Remmel's smile expertly hid his annoyance at the Hare's late arrival. Chive had to close his eyes to think. He pinched the bridge of his nose and asked, So we're going to Cavhaven? To close a rift? Yes, Chive, that's right. And this part of the writing is, it's exposition. It's showing that he missed something, and you're not going back to the Merchant Guild until this is all resolved. The merchant looked uneasy and glanced away. Well, yes, this needs to be. It's a priority, you see. Chive raised his tankard into the sky, finishing the drink, and muttered, Wrong answer. The merchant barely had a chance to stutter. What was... before the tankard came down and crushed the small bone beneath their eye. Pieces of ceramic scattered through the air as the merchant staggered back. Then, with no more than a blink, they all froze in the air and flew back as if they had forgotten their keys. They slammed into the merchant's son's back, pushing him into Chive. Chive grabbed a large, sharp piece of the tankard out of the air and held it against the panicked merchant's upper cheek. Chive, what are you? The job is to bring him back, not get ourselves killed in some rift. No, the rift has to be closed. Then let the guards close it. Do you remember how much money this guy is worth? You can buy a teleport to the elemental plane of butts for the rest of your days. Chive yelled. The improvised blade in his hand was trembling. I liked writing this because it highlighted Chive at a breaking point. This is him snapping. Something that I was very close to doing a couple times during the campaign because of very similar reasons. The party wanted to walk around and explore and, and do all this, like saw the horn off of a Triceratops when we had a goal, when we had a direct plan, when we had something that we needed to accomplish, right?
I think part of the deal there, I don't think Pithro was taking the whole thing very seriously.
I think honestly,
So-
if Pithro's character was about not taking things seriously as an intentional choice, I think that would have been fine. But it came across as just not taking stuff seriously. It wasn't like that's part of their motivation or anything. But again, that's
Yeah.
fine. That wasn't a big problem, and I had fun with it. It's totally okay. But this was, Chive reaching that exasperation point. I felt that was a good characterization of Chive snapping and saying, "No, no, we're not doing this. We're just taking this money and running. I don't want to risk my life to close some rift and continue the quest. Our goal is right here, right?" Chive saw the goal as being right in front of him and wanted to claim it. You see?
Yeah. Yeah.
We have to go. The whole world is in danger. Why should any of you care what happens to this world after what it took from me? That line. That line is the first line I wrote of this entire story, and is the most important one, because it's Chive falling apart. Why should any of you care what happens to this world after what it took from me? You see? It's pain. It's just sheer pain. But it's a selfish pain. It's a pain because Chive himself doesn't care about the world. And he, at this moment at least, is having a breakdown. He doesn't understand why anybody else would care about the world after what it took from him. After what he's seen and how bad the world could be, why could anybody else care about it? It's painful. It's a very painful line. An uncomfortable silence filled the room as those words settled on everybody. The silence was broken by Pithra softly asking, "Why? What did—" only to be interrupted by Vectis elbowing him in the side. Do not ask somebody in this state to relive their traumas. Trust me, I would know," whispered Vectis with the pain of memory in his voice. This was me trying to incorporate characters, because I wanted every character to have a couple lines, And I figured Pithra would be a good candidate for... I wanted to say this. But this is also because I wanted to say this, right? Like, you don't ask somebody to relive their trauma in the middle of a breakdown. That's evil. I'm actually going to say that. I'm going to say that's an evil thing to do, to force somebody to relive their trauma in the middle of them having a breakdown. So I wanted someone to push this, this part of the narrative. And honestly, having Pithra with being acting in innocence, because that's kind of how I saw Pithra, was acting in a naive and innocent sort of way. That was my read on the character, at least.
I mean, yeah, I feel like Pithra would probably be the better option out of the other characters to have asked why.
Yeah, and it's very on brand for Vectis to have lived through a lot of trauma, because Vectis is a very edgy character that's been through a lot, So I felt like Vectis would be the one to answer with this and say, "Hey, my dude, don't do that." Like, well, yeah, even I know that much, lied Pithro unconvincingly. Look.
I don't think Pithra would be, like, lying about that. I think he would just be like, "Oh, okay, I didn't know this."
Probably, but I wanted to lighten the mood a little bit after Chive literally just took a hostage, right? Like, yeah. I had to shift the mood a tiny bit.
Yeah, that it works.
Yeah. Fortunately, Chive did not hear. His attention was focused on a small butterfly that had landed on his nose. And you know immediately where this is going. Anybody who watched the one-shot knows exactly what this means. He shook it to the side violently, but it refused to leave. A thin river of blood lined the merchant's cheek as Chive struggled to get rid of the tiny creature. And, yeah, Chive always is going to be one to shove people away. That's their nature, right? That's his nature, right? And his want is to shove people away and to be alone and to drink. To be alone with his suffering because he feels like he deserves it. And Chive's need is comfort. Chive needs compassion. That's Chive's need. His driving need is compassion. And his want, the want of nothing, the want of not having a dedicated want, the want of pushing other people away, directly gets in the way of his need. And so, Chive on this character moment is Yeah, struggling to get rid of a tiny creature. Piffle stood next to Chive, looking up into his eyes. The small lizard reached out an arm and touched Chive's elbow. What was that? Pity? Disgust? Patronizing? No, it was compassion. A genuine compassion and concern. Not a concern for what Chive might do, but an honest concern for who Chive was. He'd never felt this before, and now it flooded into him against his will. Because again, he's an uncontrolled empath. He can't control other people's emotions affecting him. That's the backbone of the character is mechanically is that, but his wants and needs are not part of his powers. You see, but they flow into each other. Chive looked up, tears beginning to fill his eyes. His companions all looked at him with different emotions, but they also trusted him and respected him. And he had still done this. He had still done this to them. He had still taken a hostage here. Someone, Chive wasn't sure who, moved his wrist away from the merchant's face, and Chive collapsed to the ground in tears. If I was going to edit this, and I probably won't at this point, I would add more to this, add more of a build-up to him falling to the ground crying, because that is him being overwhelmed with emotion. It is him being overwhelmed with compassion of other people. I would have dragged this out a bit, but when I write from a framework. I rate the bullet points, and then I add in the beats in between. And I should have another beat in between these two paragraphs. He was angry at himself for feeling this way, for being this way. He punched the floorboards repeatedly. He wasn't sure for how long. Time ceased to exist, and what was both several long seconds and a very fast eternity ended around him. I love that turn of phrase. Several long seconds and yet a fast eternity. I misspelled that. I don't care. This is just a rough draft.
It's a very cool, phrase, though.
Thank you. He slowly stood up. His friends stood around him. Chive bit off a curse and said, Caphaven, was it? The Eastern Trail will have bandits. Spellguard likes to patrol there. Because that's what his contribution is, that he knows, the movements of bandits and things like that, because he's more of the lowlife than in the party. He is the lowlife. So that's why his party needs him. That's why people need him. I probably would have incorporated this somewhere in here, like coming up here and actually adding that in before Chive goes for the throat. Have somebody else say, hey, Chive, we need your insight on this. Sort of building up more of showing why people respect him, why his party actually does keep him around. But again, first draft. This is a first draft that probably isn't going to actually see anything further, because I wrote this for myself. I wrote this for myself to have a completion to Chive's story. Like, Chive didn't get his story arc in because it's a one-shot, you don't always get a character arc in a one-shot,
Yeah.
But I felt that Chive deserved it. Deserved to have his character arc completed.
Chive kind of felt like a character who'd been on an adventure, and this is just kind of something extra.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, it's already run the course, but I'm not sure how to phrase the thing in my head.
He's been on adventures and he's had them end poorly. That's how I'd phrase it.
Yeah.
He's been on grand adventures and he's had those grand adventures end in tragedy, because that's, so many of the characters were acting like fresh blood and like, hi, I'm, upbeat, cheerful. Yeah, let's go on an adventure. And Chive is the one who's seen war. Chive is the one who has experienced loss. And none of the other characters were playing on this idea that they had ever experienced anything tragic in their life except for Vectis. But let's be honest, Vectis's Mini Diablo's character was kind of a parody of tragedy. It wasn't, actually a tragedy. It was a farce of tragedy, which is fine. And I think that where he played it very well. But that was his intention for the character. I must assume at least that was his intention for the character, was to have it be a parody of a tragic figure. The vampire who is not repentant,
Yeah. And you said the thing where like Chive calling them his friends.
Mm-hmm.
I never thought about like whether or not Pithro saw the party as friends or just like people he works with.
Yeah, and there's a really strong argument there that Chive wasn't with them long enough to really consider them friends, but it's for his character arc. He had to feel that compassion, right? He had to have somebody force him into feeling compassion. In this case, Piffle.
Um,
So, I kind of expedited that part.
I didn't want Pithro to come across as if like this was his first time doing this kind of thing, but in more so as like I kind of wanted a nonsensical character
Mm-hmm.
whose end goal was like cartoonish kind of Saturday morning cartoon bad guy kind of thing.
Yeah,
Like he got compared to Team Aqua a lot,
yeah, I pulled that out a couple
and
times.
yeah, you and Minnie,
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of fits. But I kind of wanted it. It's like the actual seriousness of it is, yeah, he kind of wants everyone else to die, but he's not gonna do it himself. He's just gonna like do the thing. He's just gonna kick off the end of the world.
Yeah, but I think now, if you were to remake Pithro, taking some of these, these thoughts that I had the stream into effect, I think that you could make him a very interesting character.
Yeah,
I,
I absolutely will rewrite Pithro with like what we've talked about here.
mm-hmm. I look forward to seeing how that turns out. Um,
Oh.
I think this is about where I'm ready to wrap up. So let me just say that I want to hear you guys' thoughts. Did this help you in the audience? Did you enjoy this? Did this help you? And have you written characters with motivations before, or have you mostly just stuck to fairly straightforward ones? And I one thing I didn't really mention, because this is I came approach this entire stream from the perspective of game dev, right? Because it's me, I do that. But it is entirely fine to have wants but not know the character's needs yet and figure that out as you play the character. That is valid. Unless you're writing a short story, in which case you need to have it written out. Unless you're writing a video game, in which case you need to know beforehand so you can construct the story around it. In a tabletop game, you have a little bit more leeway to discover your character as you play them, but having a strong foundation and having a strong foundation of who your character is, having a personality, will help you find the rest of it, right? If you have those starting points as to build off of, then you have somewhere to go.
I think I think people pretty often, myself included, fall into the trap of, oh, I can figure it out
Mm-hmm.
as
And
I'm
then
playing, and then
they
just
don't do
never
anything with it.
do.
Yeah, exactly. And I
It's like it's either you realize too late or after it becomes irrelevant.
mm-hmm. And I think I don't like. Again, my background is in acting. I don't like that because I feel like that isn't creating a interesting enough character to be worth playing, right? All the characters are roles, right? All the characters are the role that you are playing, and it's going to be more memorable if the deeper it is. It's going to be more interesting if you create somebody with depth. So let me just wrap up here and say, tell me either something that you learned from this, or tell me about a character that you made that had depth in how you found it. If it either saying you did something that like what I did here, or telling me what process you took. What was your path to finding your character's motivation, to finding their wants and needs? And if this has helped, give the video a thumbs up. If this has helped, send the video to somebody who you think might want to see it. You know, again, I'm a YouTuber. I'm not a Twitch streamer. This video will be here forever. Anybody who wants to see this video, video is gonna be up for years. So, if this video
I feel
helped
like
you,
I'm getting flexed on.
what was that?
But now I feel like I'm getting flexed on. 'Cause I am it's
Oh no, it's just a different atmosphere. YouTube is a different atmosphere than Twitch. I am a YouTuber through and through. I am not a Twitch streamer. My stuff is designed to be consumed differently. And I like it here. I like YouTube. So thank you,
Yeah.
everybody. And I hope that you all have a wonderful evening. Cheers,
Thanks for
friends.
having me.